Chapter 1606. Lin Tianwei was shocked. He immediately stopped in his tracks and looked at Wu Yi. He could sense the sturdiness of the blood-red cage, but now, the little Taichu had been silently rescued by Wu Yi. Even though he had seen how Wu Yi had easily killed the heavenly god-tier blood ancestor, he still couldn't help but be shocked. At the same time, on the platform at the center of the Hell's blood pool, the Hell's ambush arrow king's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" he asked in a low voice as he looked at Wu Yi. His expression was no longer as casual as before. He knew very well how sturdy the blood prison he had set up was. He had previously said that he would let Lin Tianwei and the others do as they pleased. As long as they could rescue the little Taichu he had sealed inside, he would let them leave. This was because he didn't think Lin Tianyi and the others could break through the blood prison he had set up. He had only wanted to entertain Lin Tianyi and the others and add some excitement to his awakening after so many years. However, he didn't expect that Wu Yi, who was among Lin Tianyi and the others, would easily rescue the little Taichu from his prison. Moreover, he hadn't damaged the secret blood prison he had set up in the slightest. This was even more shocking than rescuing the little Taichu after destroying the blood prison he had set up. Crimson light flashed in his eyes. Wu Yi held the little Taichu in his arms and appeared very quiet. It was as if he didn't hear or see the ambush arrow king's voice and gaze. Divine light flashed from his palm and enveloped the little Taichu. In the next instant, the little Taichu's closed eyes twitched a few times. Then he slowly opened them and blinked a few times drowsily. In the next instant, he saw Wu Yi in front of him. His drowsy eyes immediately lit up. "Wu Yi? Wu Yi." The little girl's voice was childish. She jumped from Wu Yi's hands to Wu Yi's face and rubbed her cheeks intimately. She was overjoyed. It liked Wu Yi the most, just like how it liked Lin Tianyi. Wu Yi smiled gently, as if a beautiful ice flower had bloomed at this moment. She rubbed the little fellow's head. "Yeah," little Taichu called out in a childish voice. Its big eyes curved into a pair of crescent moons, looking very cute. At the side, and Shui had almost forgotten that this was the legendary Hidden Arrow Palace Hall. He looked at little Taichu enviously and blinked his eyes. "I really want to be patted on the head, too." When Lin Tian heard in Shui's words, he couldn't help but blush with shame. Wu Yi's charm was too great. Boom! A terrifying murderous aura spread out from Hidden Arrow King, who was at the center of the Hell's blood pool. A pressure as heavy as the Milky Way pressed down, causing Lin Tian and Shui and Wuxing Crocodile to tremble involuntarily. This aura was many times more terrifying than the blood ancestors when he had recovered to the heavenly god tier. It was like the difference between heaven and earth, causing them to feel immense pressure on their shoulders in an instant. It was as if a vast world was pressing down on their heads. "I'm asking you a question." Hidden Arrow King was still sitting cross-legged on the platform, looking coldly at Wu Yi. The murderous aura seemed to want to annihilate everything. Little Taichu landed on Wu Yi's shoulder. Facing the terrifying pressure, it couldn't help but shrink its little head. Then it glared at Hidden Arrow King angrily. After being separated from Lin Tian and the others by accident, it had landed nearby. Hidden Arrow King had then forcibly taken it away from the temple. Naturally, it was very unhappy. Wu Yi rubbed the little guy's head and didn't do anything else. The little guy instantly felt the pressure on its body disappear. At the same time, Lin Tian and Shui and Wuxing Crocodile also felt the pressure on their shoulders loosen. "Should we go?" Wu Yi looked at Lin Tian. Lin Tian couldn't help but smile bitterly when he met Wu Yi's gaze. The legendary Hidden Arrow King of Hell, an ancient existence from before the primordial age, was one of the 11 rulers of Hell. Now Wu Yi was ignoring him, just like the blood ancestor. "I'm afraid he won't let us go so easily." He looked at Hidden Arrow King. Almost at the same time, a wave of murderous blood chi swept toward them from the Hell blood pool. "Leave the immortal spirit royalty. You and the others will die." Hidden Arrow King looked at Wu Yi coldly. He didn't care who Wu Yi was anymore. Murderous blood chi intertwined around his body, and at the same time, boundless death chi surged. The wave of blood rolled toward Wu Yi and the others in the blink of an eye. A few blades of light silently appeared beside Wu Yi. Carrying a gentle aura, they met the wave like a gust of wind. With a sizzling sound, the waves of blood that surged out from the blood pool of hell were shattered in the blink of an eye, dissipating into bloody light. Lin Tian and the others were all shocked. The bloody light just now was terrifying. Compared to it, the blood ancestor's light was like the light of a firefly. But even so, Wu Yi easily destroyed it. In the hell blood pool, Hidden Arrow King's eyes narrowed. First, a descendant of the immortal spirit royalty. Now such an interesting human. Not bad. Very interesting. He said. The hell's blood pool boiled, and the blood radiance surged into the sky. It immediately shattered the entire small shrine, revealing the dusky sky of this place. Streaks of blood radiance turned into countless blood ghosts that pounced toward Wu Yi, emitting a terrifying wave that could devour the heavens and the earth. After countless years, this slightly rusty body seems to be able to warm up immediately. Whoa! Black wind billowed, and countless blood ghosts howled. They were like countless vengeful spirits that drowned the entire area. Leave the immortal spirit royalty. Devour the others. Hidden Arrow King said indifferently. As soon as he finished speaking, the endless blood ghosts really did reach Wu Yi and the others. They pressed down on them like 10,000 ghosts marching in the night. Lin Tian and Shui, Wuxing Crocodile, and Little Taichu couldn't help but feel chills run down their spines. Wu Yi, on the other hand, was very calm. He glanced at the endless blood ghosts pressing down on them from all directions. Streaks of bloody light exploded, and the blood ghosts were pulverized one by one. They all disappeared in the blink of an eye. Instantly, Lin Tianyi and the others all turned pale with fright. So powerful, and Shui's eyes were filled with shock. Even though she'd seen how powerful the five garments were, she still couldn't help but be shocked when she saw the endless blood ghosts being pulverized by Wu Yi with a single glance. It was too terrifying. After all, that was the terrifying attack of Hidden Arrow King from the prehistoric times. Lin Tian and Wuxing Crocodile also turned pale. Even Little Taichu couldn't help but widen his eyes. At the same time, in the center of the hell blood pool, Hidden Arrow King's eyes darkened. He slowly stood up. Human, you're really not bad. He looked at Wu Yi and said, even an ordinary early-stage divine king would have a hard time blocking that attack. However, this delicate human girl in front of him only glanced at him and dispersed that attack. Lin Tian glanced at Little Taichu on Wu Yi's shoulder, then looked at Hidden Arrow King in the center of the hell blood pool. After a pause, he looked at Wu Yi and asked, Wu Yi, can you deal with him? He's thinking about the little guy. When he asked this question, he couldn't help but feel like he was going crazy. After all, Hidden Arrow King was one of the oldest existences in the world. He was one of the rulers of hell and had lived for countless years. Now he was asking Wu Yi if she could kill such an ancient existence. Beside him, and Shui and the Five Elements crocodile could not help but widen their eyes when they heard his words. They knew that Wu Yi was strong, but Hidden Arrow King was a legendary existence. Lin Tian was asking Wu Yi to kill Hidden Arrow King right here and now. It was a little frightening. Wu Yi looked at Little Taichu on her shoulder, then looked at Lin Tian and nodded. She tilted her head and looked at Hidden Arrow King. For the first time, she raised her hand and pointed it at Hidden Arrow King. Hidden Arrow King naturally heard Lin Tian's question to Wu Yi. When he saw Wu Yi's action, his expression turned even colder. His crimson eyes flashed with a dark light that seemed capable of swallowing everything in the world. You want to kill me? You have, The air buzzed, interrupting him. Several blades of light appeared around him. Without any warning or terrifying aura, they slashed toward him in the blink of an eye. Blood splattered everywhere. Hidden Arrow King was torn into pieces, and Shui and Wuxing Crocodile trembled at the sight. And Shui trembled. The powerful Hidden Arrow King, an ancient existence from before the primordial age, had his body torn apart by Wu Yi in a single blow. Even Lin Tian, who'd asked Wu Yi to kill him, shuddered. He could tell that Hidden Arrow King had his eyes on little Taichu. He didn't want this threat to the little guy to live, so he asked Wu Yi if she could kill him. To his surprise, Wu Yi nodded calmly, then cut Hidden Arrow King into pieces. A chilling voice rang out. Hidden Arrow King's body was torn apart, but his soul was still intact. The sinister aura around him grew even stronger. His broken body quickly reassembled. Wu Yi's expression didn't change at all. She pointed her slender palm at the held blood pool. More blades of light appeared. They looked gentle, but they were incredibly powerful. One after another, they slashed at Hidden Arrow King's broken body. Blood splattered everywhere. Concealed Arrow King's body was getting more and more damaged by the concentrated light blades. Moreover, his spiritual soul was also suppressed by the dense light blades. Hidden Arrow King's voice grew even colder. His body was being torn apart, but his aura grew stronger. As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of a drum rang out. It was eerie and cold, like the summons of death. The entire space shook violently, as if it would collapse in the next moment. A black light fell from the boundless sky, turning into a human-skin drum covered in ghostly runes. Death chi surged. Crack, crack, crack. Wu Yi's dense blades of light were all shattered by the human-skin drum. Chapter 1607. The human-skin drum was covered in ghostly patterns and was surrounded by an aura of death. The aura it emitted was extremely terrifying. Lin Tian looked at the drum and was very familiar with its sound. It was the sound that had almost made them lose themselves not too long ago. Combined with how Concealed Arrow King had said that he had broken free from the sound of my concealed arrow drum, he immediately knew that this drum was the concealed arrow drum that Concealed Arrow King was talking about. It was a super treasure. At the same time, Shui and Wuxing Crocodile also guessed that this drum was the concealed arrow drum and trembled slightly. Buzz! The concealed arrow drum intertwined with strands of Yin Qi and Death Qi, forming a destructive aura above Concealed Arrow King's head. All living beings in the world are divided into 3 souls and 7 spirits. The 3 souls are Fetus Guang, Shuang Ling, and Yu Jing. They are also known as Heaven's Soul, Earth Soul, and Human Soul. The 7 spirits are Corpse Dog, Concealed Arrow, Sparrow Een, Seizing Thief, Heartless, Filthy Evil, and Extreme Desire. They correspond to joy, anger, sorrow, fear, love, evil, and desire. Concealed Arrow King's eyes were extremely deep and cold. I am Concealed Arrow, and I control the anger of all living beings. Anger can make one lose oneself, destroy people, destroy things, and destroy oneself. You will bury yourself in your anger. As soon as he finished speaking, the concealed arrow drum above his head vibrated. A sinister sound immediately rang out and spread in all directions. The sound of the drum was invisible and lingered in the space. Lin Tian immediately trembled. His spirit immediately experienced an intense pain. Instantly, a murderous aura rose in his heart. The murderous aura in his heart surged uncontrollably. The murderous aura in his heart made him want to destroy everything. As the murderous aura grew stronger, the pain in his spirit became even more intense. It was a tearing pain. Sensing this situation, he clenched his teeth and tried his best to resist. However, it was to no avail. The sound of the drum was all-pervasive, and there was nothing it could not penetrate. The more he tried to resist, the more intense the viciousness in his heart became. His divine power began to become chaotic, and his eyes turned red. The pain in his spirit also became even more intense because of this. All living beings have souls and anger. When they sink into anger, they release their primordial anger and bury other things and themselves in anger. Concealed Arrow King said coldly. As his voice fell, the concealed arrow drum above his head vibrated. Another gloomy drum sound spread. Lin Tian immediately felt even more uncomfortable. His eyes became even redder, and his divine soul became even more painful. His killing intent surged out even more violently. Die, die, die. And Shui Shui, Little Taichu, and Whooshing Crocodile did the same. Whooshing Crocodile even let out a ferocious roar. Its body grew to a height of several zhang, and its eyes were bloodshot. It swung its claws directly at Wu Yi. Its body was incomparably huge, and its claws were as sharp as the soul-burning blade. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of Wu Yi. Wu Yi raised her hand and blocked the claw of Whooshing Crocodile, who had almost lost his will due to the sound of the concealed arrow drum. Her expression remained calm as she watched Concealed Arrow King in the center of the Hell Blood Pool. Concealed Arrow King's gaze fell on Wu Yi. His expression was indifferent. You're not weak. You won't easily succumb to endless anger. Let me see how long you can last. He looked at Wu Yi. As soon as he finished speaking, the concealed arrow drum above his head emitted another drum sound. It carried with it an eerie chill and the aura of death. Lin Tian and the others trembled violently again. Their wills became even more chaotic. Even someone as strong as Lin Tian almost lost himself. Whooshing Crocodile roared. Its eyes were bloodshot, and its giant claws pressed down on Wu Yi. Because of the concealed arrow drum sound, it was now extremely powerful. Its claws were so powerful that Wu Yi's body was like a speck of dust compared to its claws. Even so, its claws were blocked by Wu Yi. No matter how furious it was, it couldn't shake Wu Yi at all. Wu Yi quietly watched Concealed Arrow King in the center of the Hell Blood Pool. A faint halo spread out from her. The halo was gentle like water ripples. It spread out for thousands of feet in an instant. Lin Tian and Shui Shui, Whooshing Crocodile, and Little Taichu's red eyes immediately returned to normal. The violent killing intent disappeared, and the pain in their souls disappeared. They returned to normal. Whooshing Crocodile was shocked to see that it had actually slapped Wu Yi. It hurriedly retracted its claws and shrunk its body. It looked at Concealed Arrow King and cursed, F***CKU. It was furious that it had lost its self-awareness because of the concealed arrow drum sound and attacked its friends. This made it very angry. Lin Tian took a deep breath. There was still some lingering fear on his face. Is this the power that the 10 lords of the extreme Temple of Hell said they could control, interfere with, and destroy the 3 souls and 7 spirits? There was simply no way to resist the sound of the drum just now. He had a feeling that it was no longer a simple divine spell and divine path, but a more powerful force. There was almost no way to resist it. With this feeling, he couldn't help but look at Wu Yi. Once again, he was shocked by Wu Yi's strength. Wu Yi didn't seem to be affected by that strange power at all. She even let them break free from it easily. In the center of the Hell Blood Pool, Concealed Arrow King stared at Wu Yi. A faint light flashed through his eyes. You can actually stop it. His expression darkened. Wu Yi looked at Concealed Arrow King. She raised her hand again and aimed it at him from afar. There was a soft hum in the air. Gentle light blades appeared again. They turned into a rain of light and rolled towards Concealed Arrow King. The light blades looked very gentle. They didn't give off the slightest feeling of fear. However, Concealed Arrow King didn't ignore them. He swung out a large number of blood blades to meet the light blades. Of course, he didn't care at all. I've lived for countless years. I've seen the ups and downs of the universe. Back then, I suffered an unimaginable injury and am no longer at my peak. However, I still have the fighting capabilities of a half-godly emperor. Do you really think you can fight against me? He said coldly. With a loud boom, the bloody light around his body boiled. Moreover, an extremely thick aura of death spread out in a vast and mighty manner. When this aura appeared, Lin Tian and the others were all shocked. Furthermore, the words spoken by that man shocked the crowd even more. Now, he's comparable to a half-godly emperor, and he's seriously injured. He's no longer at his peak? So, back then, he was a godly emperor? And Shui Shui and Whooshing Crocodile trembled. Lin Tian was shocked too. Hearing Concealed Arrow King's words, he was undoubtedly a godly emperor back then. He was a godly emperor from the ancient times. Boom! Blood chi surged. Blood chi, yin chi, and death chi all rolled. Concealed Arrow King's eyes turned even redder. In a flash, the aura of a half-godly emperor was revealed. The entire subduing Arrow Palace was shaking, and the Yin Temple was shaking as well. It was as if there was a god-slaying earthquake, and it was about to collapse. His eyes were blood red, and there was a strange energy intertwining with each other, as if it was the symbol of death. King's verdict, he shouted coldly. As he spoke, blood light surged in his body. Along with the concealed arrow drum sound, a huge blood sword condensed above his head. It was more than 3 meters long. It looked like an ancient sword that could destroy the world. Once it appeared, it seemed like the world was about to collapse. Lin Tian and the others trembled in the face of the sword. Before the 3-meter-long blood sword even landed, they already felt like they were about to die. Clearly, this was a destructive divine ability. Wu Yi's light blade was immediately shattered by this blood sword. The blood sword's baleful aura of death swallowed everything. You're not qualified to be arrogant in front of me. Concealed Arrow King's voice was cold. The blood sword slashed toward Wu Yi. Everywhere it passed, the space turned murky. Die. To him, Wu Yi's calmness and calmness in front of him was a form of arrogance. It was a great disrespect to him, the leader of Concealed Arrow Palace. The blood sword pressed down. It was very slow, but everywhere it passed, nothing was left. It was a true sword of destruction. Seeing the sword press down, Wu Yi was still very calm. She lowered her right hand, then raised it again. Strands of divine light seeped out of her delicate palm and met the blood sword's pressure. The divine light overflowed and shattered the terrifying blood sword. Lin Tian and the others were shocked. Concealed Arrow King had used that powerful blood sword with his half-step divine emperor strength. It was a truly destructive attack, enough to destroy the immortal region. But now, Wu Yi had shattered it so easily. They were all shocked. At the same time, Concealed Arrow King was also shocked. Just now, Wu Yi had revealed a trace of divine might. Although it was very weak, he still sensed it. Half-step divine emperor. He hadn't thought that the girl in front of him, who looked delicate and quiet, would be a half-step divine emperor. She was at the same cultivation level as him. But what really shocked him was something else. I was at the peak of the divine emperor realm back then. Now, I should be able to crush anyone at the same level. I could even kill an ordinary early divine emperor. But now, how did you? Because of serious injuries, a cultivator who had temporarily fallen from a high level to a low level should be able to call himself a king under normal circumstances. He should be able to crush anyone who was slightly stronger than him. After all, even though his strength had temporarily declined, he had once been at an extremely high level of cultivation. In terms of battle experience, soul energy, and physical strength, he was much stronger than the other cultivators who had temporarily declined to this lower level. But now, because of his serious injuries, he had fallen from the peak of the Divine Emperor realm to the half-step Divine Emperor realm. Under such circumstances, he had used several different powerful techniques, including his strongest divine ability, King's Judgment. But he had been easily defeated by a half-step Divine Emperor who was at the same level as him. This made him shiver. This was not normal. Or rather, this was a bit exaggerated. While he was shivering, Lin Tian and Shui, Wuxing Crocodile, and Little Taichu were all shocked. Half-step, Divine Emperor. The 5 elements alligator's mouth couldn't help but tremble. Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi, his eyes flashing. Chapter 1608. Lin Tian and the others were stunned. Although they had vaguely sensed that Wu Yi's cultivation level was very strong, they didn't expect it to be that strong. She was already a half-step Divine Emperor. A half-step Divine Emperor. She was only half a step away from the Divine King realm and becoming a real Divine Emperor. Yeah, Little Taichu's big eyes were very bright. She looked very happy. She could destroy the mystic region easily. and Shui swallowed. In the center of the Hell blood pool, Hell's subduing Arrow King looked at Wu Yi with surprise. He was shocked by Wu Yi's strength. However, the surprise disappeared in the blink of an eye. His blood-red eyes became even more profound. A ray of light intertwined in them. Human, you're very special. I'll make an exception and give you a chance. Why don't you join Hell? If you join Hell, you'll shine even brighter. Your name will shake the heavens and dominate the world. It'll be easy. He looked at Wu Yi. Lin Tian's expression changed. An ancient expert from the primordial antiquity era, one of the 11 dominators of Hell's macro world, was inviting Wu Yi to join Hell. Wuxing Crocodile bared his teeth and cursed. You want Wu Yi to betray her tribe? Stop daydreaming. Daydreaming? Little Taichu agreed. Subduing Arrow King glanced at Wuxing Crocodile indifferently. His eyes fell on Little Taichu for a moment, then on Wu Yi. Choose to join Hell, and you can live today. In the future, you can reach the peak of cultivation. If you refuse, you'll be reduced to dust here. He looked at Wu Yi and said, It's a pity for someone like you to die. After recovering from his shock at Wu Yi's strength, he once again became calm and indifferent, as if everything was under his control. And Shui felt a little uncomfortable when he saw the other party's attitude. Even though he knew that the other party was a legendary ancient existence who was at the peak of the deity emperor realm back in the day, he still couldn't help but grumble. Sister Wu Yi clearly crushed your body several times. You're being suppressed. How dare you speak in such a high and mighty tone? Concealed Arrow King naturally heard in Shui's mumbling, but his expression didn't change at all. He didn't care at all. His gaze fell on Wu Yi. Human, what is your choice? Buzz! Gentle light intertwined in this space. Wu Yi was still very quiet. Her delicate palm pointed at concealed Arrow King. Immediately, more blades of light appeared around concealed Arrow King, attacking him from different angles. Concealed Arrow Emperor raised his hand. The blood pool and hell boiled. Bloody light shot up into the sky and formed a solid defensive screen in front of him. It seems that you have refused. What a pity, he said. As soon as he finished speaking, the huge concealed Arrow Palace rumbled and started shaking. Inside the concealed Arrow Hall, mystical Tao inscriptions appeared one after another, instantly interweaving into a huge divine formation. There was a vast aura of life circling around it, but there was also an extremely dense aura of death lingering in all directions. The two opposing and contradictory fluctuations blended together, turning this place into a huge ocean of life and death in the blink of an eye. Lin Tian and the others all trembled. As the mystical patterns appeared, the power of life and death surged. It was as if it could rule over the life and death of all living things. Even the sky changed color. Could this be? Lin Tian felt a chill run down his spine. Eternal divine Tao, life and death. Concealed Arrow King stood in the center of the blood pool. His eyes were deep and his expression was indifferent. All 11 palaces of hell are imprinted with the eternal divine Tao by the Holy King. This is enough to destroy everything. Chills ran down Lin Tian's spine when he heard this. Sure enough, it was as he guessed. The markings of the Tao here contained the eternal energy of the laws of life and death. And Shui and the others also felt a chill run down their spines. The eternal divine Tao was a power that surpassed the divine Tao. Normal means couldn't possibly block it. No wonder that old bastard dared to speak to Miss Wu Yi in such a lofty manner, even though he was clearly crushed by Wu Yi. It turns out that this place has a flawless divine formation imprinted with the eternal divine Tao of life and death. This Wuxing Crocodile gritted his teeth. The divine formation of life and death circled around the entire concealed Arrow Palace. The power of the eternal divine Tao of life and death surged violently. Crimson light wove around concealed Arrow King. His eyes were still fixed on Wu Yi. Human, he said coolly, you're truly extraordinary. I cherish talents, so I'll give you one last chance. Brand yourself with the seal of hell and join hell. Otherwise, You'll be reduced to a bloody dust by the eternal divine Tao of life and death, just like everyone else here. As he spoke, he seemed to be displaying his might. In this place, the life and death divine matrix in the concealed arrow hall trembled. In an instant, it emitted an even more astonishing power of life and death. Wu Yi looked at concealed arrow king and lowered her raised right hand. Her expression was as calm and peaceful as ever. Concealed arrow king's expression darkened at her demeanor. You've given up on the last chance I've given you. Then die and be reduced to dust along with everyone else. He said coldly. The divine formation of life and death trembled even more vigorously. Boundless eternal divine Tao of life and death pressed down on Wu Yi. At the same time, it enveloped Lin Tian and the others. It's over, it's over, it's over. Wuxing Crocodile couldn't help but howl. Lin Tian couldn't help but grit his teeth. The eternal divine Tao of life and death was almost unstoppable. Were they going to die here? He tilted his head and looked at Wu Yi. Wu Yi was still very calm. She didn't show any emotion in the face of the eternal divine Tao of life and death pressing down on her. A glimmer of light flashed in his gentle eyes. The space in the concealed arrow palace seemed to freeze. The eternal divine Tao of life and death pressing down on them all stopped. Then they all shattered with a sizzling sound. Even the divine formation of life and death in the concealed arrow palace collapsed in the next moment. Lin Tian's expression changed. And Shui, Wuxing Crocodile, and Little Taichu were also shocked. The eternal divine Tao of life and death pressing down on them and the divine formation of life and death were all destroyed in an instant. The two men and two beasts looked at Wu Yi in unison. Clearly, they knew that Wu Yi was responsible for the destruction of the eternal divine Tao of life and death. Lin Tian, in particular, had clearly seen a strange light flash in Wu Yi's eyes when he looked at Wu Yi just now. At the same time, on the platform at the very center of the Hell Blood Pool, concealed Arrow Emperor's expression truly changed when he saw Wu Yi. He couldn't hide his astonishment. Space. You actually control space. That eternal divine Tao of life and death. A faint light flashed in Wu Yi's eyes just now. She'd completely frozen the eternal divine Tao of life and death, then shattered the eternal divine Tao of life and death. The eternal divine Tao of life and death hadn't been very strong in that instant. Ordinary people wouldn't have been able to detect it, but concealed Arrow Emperor still sensed it. After all, he was no ordinary person. He was concealed Arrow Emperor of Hell, a peak divine emperor back in the day. What? Lin Tian and Shui, Wuxing Crocodile, and Little Taichu all paled at concealed Arrow Emperor's words. The known Daos in the world were, in ascending order, the Great Tao, the Immortal Tao, the Divine Tao, and the Eternal Divine Tao that surpassed the Divine Tao. Amongst them, there were a few thousand Grand Daos, Immortal Daos, and Divine Daos. However, there were merely 3 Eternal Divine Daos, and they were time, space, and life and death. Amongst these 3 Daos, time was the first, space was the second, and life and death was the third. The 2 humans and 2 beasts were stunned. Wu Yi had actually controlled space, the second most powerful eternal divine Tao. That was a power that surpassed life and death. Rumor had it that space was a weapon wherever one looked. Space was one's body. Among the known Daos, only time could suppress space. He actually controls space. Seriously? Lin Tian smiled wryly. In terms of Tao, doesn't that mean he's even stronger than that Holy King Concealed Arrow spoke of? That Holy King is the Lord of Hell, isn't he? Wuxing Crocodile couldn't help but gasp. So powerful, so powerful. And Shui's admiration for Wu Yi deepened. Yi is so amazing. Little Taichu was overjoyed. Wu Yi rubbed the little guy's head, then looked at Concealed Arrow Emperor. Eternal Divine Tao, space. Very good. Human, you are indeed extraordinary. Concealed Arrow Emperor met Wu Yi's gaze with an icy glare. He glanced at little Taichu on Wu Yi's shoulder and said coldly, "You were able to rescue the royal family of a mortal spirit from my blood prison without anyone noticing. That was also because of space, wasn't it? How could I have misjudged you back then?" Lin Tian's expression changed slightly. "I see," he murmured. He hadn't even seen Wu Yi attack back then. Little Taichu had been moved out of Concealed Arrow Emperor's cage by Wu Yi without anyone noticing. So it was because of space. Wu Yi had ignored the blood prison and moved the little guy closer with space. Wu Yi's gaze was calm. When he looked at Concealed Arrow Emperor, a faint light flashed, and the space around Concealed Arrow Emperor immediately distorted. Concealed Arrow King was no ordinary person after all. He immediately dodged to the side. However, he had only taken a single step when he slammed into an invisible spatial barrier and was sent flying. Dense cracks immediately appeared on his sturdy body as bright red blood seeped out from them. After he was sent flying, his body appeared in the distorted space from before in the blink of an eye. A strong spatial force surged and swallowed him in an instant. Poof! Blood splattered everywhere. His sturdy body was directly crushed by the distorting power of space. Boom! The power of blood and evil intertwined. Ambush Arrow King reformed his body in the blink of an eye. He glanced coldly at Wu Yi. With a wave of his hand, he absorbed all the blood in the blood pool into his body. Then, he drove the Ambush Arrow Drum out of the Ambush Arrow Palace and fled into the distance. Chapter 1609. Concealed Arrow King was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was already far away. Hell's Concealed Arrow King is running away? And Shuei's eyes widened. The legendary super ancient existence, Hell's Concealed Arrow King, had abandoned the Concealed Arrow Palace and chosen to flee. In his current state, facing Wu Yi, who can control space, his only chance of survival is to run away. Lin Tiandao. That old fart. He was acting all high and mighty just now, but now he's running away like a stray dog. How embarrassing. Wuxing Crocodile said, feeling very satisfied. And Shui looked at Wu Yi with even more respect. The legendary Concealed Arrow King of Hell, one of the 11 rulers of Hell, had been so easily forced to flee by Wu Yi. This was enough to shake the heavens. Whoosh! His voice pierced through the air. Concealed Arrow King's aura of evil and bloodthirst intertwined around him. In the blink of an eye, he was already extremely far away. Wu Yi didn't make any moves to stop him. He simply looked in the direction Concealed Arrow King had fled in. In the next instant, a muffled sound came from that direction. Concealed Arrow King's figure was immediately sent flying back. He landed with a thump inside the Concealed Arrow Palace. As Wu Yi's gaze swept past, space distorted and sharp spatial blades manifested. With the force of 10,000 swords, they mercilessly slashed at Concealed Arrow King, who had fallen into the Concealed Arrow Palace. Immediately, the entire subduing arrow hall began to tremble with a rumbling sound. Cracks appeared in many places. Shatter! A low roar sounded. Blood gushed out from where Concealed Arrow King had been attacked by the spatial blades. This was the blood of Hell's blood pool. It corroded everything and turned into a blood giant. As Concealed Arrow King growled, he forcibly pushed aside the dense spatial blades. Then, the blood giant couldn't hold on any longer and shattered with a hiss. So, the Concealed Arrow King's body was covered in cracks, and it was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries. He glanced coldly at Wu Yi, then turned the Concealed Arrow Drum into a streak of blood-red light and fled into the distance once again. He knew that he was not in his peak condition, and there was no way he would be a match for Wu Yi, who had mastered the laws of space, in a head-on confrontation. Fleeing was the wisest choice. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was already extremely far away. Wu Yi was very quiet and didn't move at all. She only looked in the direction Concealed Arrow King had fled in. Wherever his gaze passed, space froze, twisted, and shattered. Concealed Arrow King's escape route was sealed off. Pooh! A sharp spatial blade swept out, cutting it into pieces. Concealed Arrow Death's song. Concealed Arrow King's soul was immortal. Before he could reform his physical body, a chilling voice came from his soul body. Instantly, the concealed arrow drum vibrated, and the faint sound of the drum rang out again with the power to destroy souls. It was extremely frightening, but in the next moment, Concealed Arrow King screamed in pain. The Concealed Arrow Death song he'd used was isolated in a narrow space by the invisible laws of space. It bounced back and acted on his own body, causing him to be severely injured. This is the laws of space. It's just like the legends. Space is a weapon of destruction as far as the eye can see. There's nothing it can't do. Whooshing Crocodile couldn't help but shudder. On the side, Lin Tian was also moved. Now, Wui was merely standing by the side, not moving at all. Just a simple glance was enough to injure Concealed Arrow King so badly that he couldn't even escape. Even the destruction Concealed Arrow King had unleashed was blocked by the law of space, which then backfired on Concealed Arrow King. Wu Yi's means were truly terrifying. "Break for me!" Concealed Arrow King roared. The sound of the concealed arrow drum stopped, and the blood-red light shone brightly. Concealed Arrow King once again summoned the hell blood pool in his body, using the majestic power contained in the pool to protect himself. He barely managed to block the power of space and melted into the void to escape. In the blink of an eye, he was nowhere to be seen. Even his aura disappeared without a trace. However, it was only for a moment. Somewhere further away, the void shattered, and Concealed Arrow King's body fell out in a sorry state. There were even more cracks on his body as he was blasted out of the void by the invisible power of space. At the same time, a large area of space blades swept by, cutting him into pieces. "Damn it!" Concealed Arrow King roared. He wrapped his shattered body with his soul and tried to escape again. He had no intention of fighting now. He knew that fighting head-on would be futile. Dodging and running were the best options. Wui just stood there quietly, not moving at all. Wherever his gaze passed, the space moved as if it was his subject, sealing and suppressing all directions. He blocked Concealed Arrow King time and time again, constantly injuring him. Puff! 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 Concealed Arrow King roared. He exploded again and again, splattering blood everywhere. This old thing can still withstand the power of space laws. He's still alive even after suffering so many injuries. Whooshing Crocodile was moved. He's one of the 11 dominators of hell, after all. He was at the peak of the Divine Emperor realm back then. It's not that easy to kill him, Lin Tiandao said, but his aura has weakened too much. He's not far from death. Buzz! Divine light intertwined, gentle and pure. The space seemed to have a mind of its own. It moved on its own under Wu Yi's gaze, turning into a destructive weapon again and again, causing the powerful Concealed Arrow King to suffer more and more injuries. "I'll fight you to the death," Concealed Arrow King roared. There was no hope for escape. At that moment, he used the concealed arrow drum to its limit. The drum sound was no longer as eerie and cold as before. Instead, it was as ear-piercing as thunder. He controlled the concealed arrow drum, turning it into a blinding beam of destructive light that swept toward Wu Yi. However, in the next moment, he trembled violently, and the space around him trembled. In the blink of an eye, it turned into an invisible spatial cage, imprisoning him within. The power of destruction that he had conjured exploded within the spatial cage. Just like the concealed arrow soul song from before, the power of destruction landed on him instead, causing him to be severely injured once again. His body exploded again. The concealed arrow drum was covered in cracks as well. It was like a fragile piece of ceramic that was about to shatter at any moment. Even his divine soul had been severely injured, and his soul energy had been weakened by many times. Buzz! Spatial power surged. This time it was extremely shocking. It sounded like billions of birds flapping their wings. At the top of the cage, the invisible spatial power took form. It swept out like a white gust of wind, gradually condensing into a white saint's sword. It was around 3 meters long. The power of the laws of space was extremely dense. Concealed Arrow King's physical body was formed. He couldn't help but tremble violently when he faced the divine sword. At that moment, he felt the true threat of death. "Human, stop!" he yelled at Wu Yi in the distance. In his current state, he definitely wouldn't be able to block the divine sword that was formed completely by space laws. He would be killed instantly. Wu Yi didn't show any emotion. Her eyes were calm. The divine sword vibrated and buzzed, about to fall on Concealed Arrow King. However, it was also at this moment that her gaze shifted slightly and landed on another direction not far away. Seeing that, Lin Tian was confused. He asked, "What's wrong, Wu Yi?" And Shui, Whooshing Crocodile, and Little Taichu were also confused. They couldn't help but look at Wu Yi. Almost at the next moment, the space where Wu Yi was looking at suddenly cracked, and then it exploded. A vast aura of death surged, and an ancient book rushed out. It was covered with densely packed ancient divine seals, and thick black light and blood light lingered around it. Its aura was terrifying to the extreme. Instantly, Lin Tian and Whooshing Crocodile's expressions changed. They would never forget this ancient book, the Book of Life and Death. Lin Tian's eyelids twitched. When he and Whooshing Crocodile were dragged into Extreme Een Temple for the first time, they'd seen this ancient book. It was like an old demon that was about to destroy the world. "What?" And Shui's eyes widened. "This is the Book of Life and Death. Something like this really exists." She knew a lot more about hell than Lin Tian and Whooshing Crocodile. However, she didn't know about the existence of the Book of Life and Death. When she heard Lin Tian say the name of this ancient book, she was stunned. Then, she looked at the ancient book. Sure enough, she saw 3 ancient characters on its surface, the Book of Life and Death. This, her eyes widened even more. At the same time, Concealed Arrow King, who was trapped in a spatial cage, looked at the Book of Life and Death with delight. "Holy King, the Book of Life and Death. Is this the Holy King that Concealed Arrow was talking about? The Lord of Hell?" Whooshing Crocodile's expression changed. Lin Tian looked at the Book of Life and Death with a grave expression. He thought for a moment and said, "That shouldn't be the case. This Book of Life and Death is the Lord of Hell's divine weapon. A weak strand of his consciousness resides in it. In the sky, the Book of Life and Death intertwined with the light of death. It truly seemed to be the source of death. Splitting life and death, space, a hazy voice came from the Book of Life and Death. The ancient book intertwined with the terrifying power of death and rushed toward Wu Yi. Such a scene immediately caused Lin Tian and the others to turn pale. Miss Wu Yi shattered the divine formation of life and death here with her spatial laws. The Lord of Hell's consciousness in the Book of Life and Death sensed the spatial laws and came here to attack. Whooshing Crocodile exclaimed. The Book of Life and Death transformed into a ball of light, destroying everything in its path. A hazy voice came again. "Space, immortal spirit royalty." Lin Tian's expression changed again. The identity of the little Taichu on Wu Yi's shoulder was also discovered by the Book of Life and Death in an instant. With a rumble, the dark light of the Book of Life and Death surrounded it. The whole world shook as if it was about to collapse. Boom! Chapter 16:10. The sarcophagus looked like it was made of ordinary materials, but the intertwined aura was extremely terrifying, as if it could devour everything. With a bang, the Book of Life and Death was sent flying tens of thousands of feet away. "This is..." Lin Tian was shocked, and Whooshing Crocodile's eyes widened. Back when they were in the 10-direction sky region, they were dragged into the Extreme Een Hall for the first time and almost died there. At that time, it was all thanks to the sudden appearance of this stone coffin and the battle between it and the Life and Death book that allowed them to luckily escape. Unexpectedly, Now that the life and death book had rushed out, the stone coffin also followed closely behind. After the book of life and death rushed out, the sarcophagus immediately rushed out from the same position. Have they been fighting all these years? Whooshing Crocodile said with widened eyes. Lin Tian's expression changed slightly when he heard this. Looking at the current situation, he couldn't help but feel that Whooshing Crocodile's guess was very likely to be true. Dozens of years, he muttered to himself. This sarcophagus and the book of life and death had been chasing each other for dozens of years. Various kinds of lights intertwined around the sarcophagus, and a soul shadow was faintly condensed. Its appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but a domineering aura intertwined around it. It moved the sarcophagus and attacked the book of life and death again. Bang! The soul shadow threw a punch and landed directly on the book of life and death. With a bang, the book of life and death was sent flying again, shattering a piece of the void. It seemed as if the world was about to be shattered by it. Whooshing Crocodile swallowed his saliva and said, "It's as domineering as before." Lin Tian's eyes flickered. The soul shadow condensed from the sarcophagus was just a remnant soul, but its aura was extremely terrifying. It was countless times more powerful than the Hell's Ambush Arrow King. They couldn't be compared at all. Beside them, Wu Yi's gaze also fell on the soul shadow condensed from the book of life and death and the sarcophagus. Her expression was still very calm, and there was no change in her expression. Only a faint light flashed in her eyes. At this moment, the aura of death and blood surged. In the distance, the Hell's Ambush Arrow King took the opportunity to shake the ambush arrow drum and break free from the spatial cage, because Wu Yi was looking at the soul shadow condensed from the book of life and death and the sarcophagus. Lord Saint King. The concealed Arrow King's expression changed when he saw the life and death book being sent flying. However, when he saw the remnant soul condensed from the stone coffin, his eyes involuntarily trembled. He was shocked and furious. Moreover, there was fear in the depths of his eyes. Nameless? Hearing concealed Arrow King's voice, and Shui was shocked. She looked at the remnant soul condensed in the sarcophagus, her eyes filled with shock. That's Nameless? Lin. And Whooshing Crocodile couldn't help but look at her too. He was very surprised by this remnant soul's identity. After all, it wasn't his first time seeing it. And Shui took a deep breath. I've seen this name in an extremely tattered ancient book. Nameless, the first taboo great god before the primordial age. First taboo great god? Lin Tian's expression changed. How terrifying must this person have been to have such a title? At the same time, he also remembered that when he saw the sarcophagus for the first time, a voice came from the book of life and death. At that time, there were only 3 hazy words. First taboo. This title is a little domineering. Whooshing Crocodile's eyes widened. Boom, boom, boom. In front of them, shocking divine powers surged. Nameless remnant soul's appearance couldn't be seen clearly. It drove the sarcophagus up against the sky and kept colliding with the book of life and death. Beams of terrifying black light burst out, and the entire world started to crack. Although it's just a replica of the book of life and death and a weak remnant soul, even so, it can't even suppress the remnant soul of a junior. Holy King Lun Zhuan, you're indeed old. An indifferent voice came. A figure appeared silently in the sky. It was enveloped in black light, and its face couldn't be seen clearly. Only a pair of eyes could be seen, and they were frighteningly deep. Grand Supreme. A hazy voice came from the book of life and death. It was neither happy nor sad. Concealed Arrow King was shocked. He hurriedly bowed to the figure that suddenly appeared in the distance. Grand Supreme Lord. At the same time, Lin Tian and Shui and Whooshing Crocodile couldn't help but turn pale. Grand Supreme? Isn't that the representative of the heavenly Tao from some ancient era that was made up in unofficial history? Could it be that it exists? How is that possible? They were all shocked. In the sky, Grand Supreme was enveloped in black light. His eyes were so deep that they seemed to be able to contain the entire world. He raised his hand and grabbed at the nameless remnant soul. Before the primordial age, just treated as if it was destroyed. His huge hand pressed down, and black and yellow light intertwined. It was terrifyingly heavy, and an extremely oppressive aura spread out. The Book of Life and Death was surrounded by endless death aura. Just then, it flipped a page, and a strange ancient seal flew out. It turned into a vortex that could devour everything and engulfed the nameless remnant soul. The two unparalleled powers locked down the entire area. Buzz! Suddenly, the sky shook and dragon patterns appeared in the sky. They turned into a giant dragon that was thousands of feet long and swooped down. It shook off Grand Supreme's huge handprint and the death vortex of the Book of Life and Death. Grand Supreme, Holy King Luan Juan, even ancient people like you would team up to fight me one day. You're done for. The sky cracked open, and a slender figure stepped out. He walked calmly to the nameless remnant soul and stood beside it. Countless dragon patterns intertwined around his body. His appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but his aura seemed to be able to suppress the sky. In an instant, Lin Tian's expression changed. Looking at this slender figure, his eyes couldn't help but twitch violently. At the same time, Wuxing Crocodile and Shui Shui and Little Taichu were all shocked. In the distance, concealed Arrow King's expression also changed drastically. This person, and you, and Shui Shui looked at the slender figure that suddenly appeared in the sky, and then at Lin Tian. His eyes were wide open. During this period of time, when she was together with Lin Tian, she had seen Lin Tian bring out his dragon marks. And now, this slender figure that suddenly appeared in this place, exuding an extremely powerful aura, was actually surrounded by dense dragon marks. Could it be Celestial Venerable Zonglong? No way. Wuxing Crocodile swallowed his saliva. That's right. It's that person. It can't be wrong. Lin Tian's eyes twitched violently. When he first obtained the dragon burial scripture, many images appeared in his consciousness. He had seen Celestial Venerable Zonglong in those images. The Celestial Venerable Zonglong he saw back then didn't have the same aura as the slender figure here. However, there was a very similar aura. This aura seemed to be the aura of the origin. There was no way he would mistake it. Junior Zonglong in the sky. Grand Supreme's eyes were as deep as black holes. He stared at the slender figure that suddenly appeared. I have to say that you're not bad. Even that battle back then didn't kill you. However, you and that nameless junior are as arrogant as ever. You were lucky enough to survive back then, and your spiritual consciousness has returned after reincarnation. Yet, you want to challenge us with that nameless junior again? 2 against 2. It's not biased. The figure with dragon patterns around him said. Lin Tian's eyes flickered even more when he heard Grand Supreme's words. He couldn't help but clench his fists. It really is him. Beside him, Wuxing Crocodile's eyes also twitched. Is this really Celestial Venerable Zonglong of the 9 Celestial Venerables? In the current 10-direction celestial domain, there were 9 famous figures in the history of cultivation. They were called the 9 Celestial Venerables. They didn't expect to see one of the 9 in this place at this time. Celestial Venerable Zonglong. Soon, their expressions changed again. From Grand Supreme's words, they confirmed that the slender figure in front of them was Celestial Venerable Zonglong. At the same time, they also heard another meaning. The Celestial Venerable Zonglong that's well known in the cultivation world of 10-direction celestial domain is the reincarnation of a supreme expert from an even more ancient era. Now, he has recovered his spiritual consciousness and memories. They naturally knew about reincarnation. According to the records in the ancient books, some supreme experts who were severely injured only had a weak spiritual consciousness and remnant soul left. They were so weak that they couldn't recover. Therefore, they would consciously or unconsciously choose to start a new life as a newborn baby. This was the so-called reincarnation. At the same time, there were also some supreme experts who, in order to break through the bottleneck of cultivation and reach a higher peak, would cruelly shatter their own bodies and choose to start a new life as a newborn baby with a complete soul. In order to accumulate soul energy, they would then break through the bottleneck that was once difficult to break through, which was also reincarnation. The difference between the two was that the former might be able to recover their past memories and find their former selves after reincarnation, but they might not be able to recover their past memories and truly start a new life. As for their strength, they might be weaker than their previous life, but they might also be stronger than their previous life. However, as for the latter, as long as one's cultivation reached a certain level or encountered some special stimulation after being reborn, one could definitely recover one's past memories and find oneself. Moreover, one's strength would definitely surpass one's previous life in this life, even if it was just a little bit more. The man and the crocodile were stunned. The celestial venerable Zonglong of the 10 Directions celestial domain was in existence from an even more ancient era. If the 10 Directions celestial domain knew about this, it would definitely shake the cultivation world of the 10 Directions celestial domain. Death Chi surrounded the sky, and the dim light was terrifying. Grand Supreme looked at the celestial venerable Zonglong with deep indifference in his eyes. You're very bold and courageous, but you're also very conceited and foolish. He walked toward the two and said to the celestial venerable Zonglong, whether it was before the primordial antiquity era or now, only your master can fight with us head-on. You and that nameless junior are still far from being able to do that. He walked toward the celestial venerable Zonglong and the nameless remnant soul. His aura surged as if he was the lord of heaven and earth, instantly suppressing everything. The nameless remnant soul and the celestial venerable Zonglong were like small boats in a stormy sea that could capsize and be annihilated at any time. Lin Tian and the others couldn't stop trembling as if a vast world was swallowing them up. Before the primordial antiquity era, we weren't as strong as you because we can't compare to you. However, if you think that our cultivation has always been stuck before the primordial antiquity era, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Time is passing and eras are changing. Our strength is also rising at a speed that you can't compare to. Chapter 16:11. Celestial Venerate Zonglong's voice was calm. However, with the aura that he exuded, there was a supreme majesty that caused the dark sky to tremble and thunder to rumble. Celestial Venerate Zonglong, the most powerful person before the primordial age, and he has a master? Lin Tian and Wuxing Crocodile were shocked. In the sky, Grand Supreme's eyes narrowed as he looked coldly at Celestial Venerate Zonglong. He never expected that the junior in front of him had reached such a high level in this era and was no longer inferior to him. His eyes turned even colder after hearing Celestial Venerate Zonglong's last words, but he did not refute it. Instead, an unconcealable murderous intent rose in him. Your lineage will be wiped out. No one will be able to live. A dim light surrounded his body, as if a blazing flame was burning, as if it could incinerate everything in the world. In the next moment he moved. The dim light around his body expanded again and covered the sky. It pressed down on Celestial Venerate Zonglong and enveloped John Doe's remnant soul beside him. A true dragon formed by dragon tattoos circled around Celestial Venerate Zonglong's body. His face could not be seen clearly, and only a pair of deep eyes could be seen. He seemed very calm. Your divine consciousness incarnation, Sage King Linjuan's replica of the Life and Death Book and the spiritual consciousness in it, as well as Extreme Een Hall and Subduing Arrow Hall, will all be buried here today. As soon as he finished speaking, the true dragon outside his body roared, as if it was a real divine dragon. Its mighty dragon power rushed towards Grand Supreme. Time has changed. Junior Zonglong, you're getting more and more arrogant. You're just a divine consciousness. So what if your cultivation has surpassed what it used to be? You're still far from it. Do you think you can destroy my incarnation? Grand Supreme's voice was cold. The dim light and the true dragon tattoos collided. Everything in the surrounding space, turned into nothingness and ceased to exist. Lin Tian and Shui Shui were shocked. In this place, the Life and Death book was a replica, John Doe was a remnant soul, and Grand Supreme and Celestial Venerate Zhang Long were divine consciousness incarnations. None of them were their original bodies, but they still had such terrifying power. These guys, Jane, are simply monsters. Whooshing Crocodile's voice trembled. Boom! At this moment, a shocking black light rolled as the nameless remnant's soul moved. Suddenly, it emitted an even more shocking aura. It controlled the stone coffin to suppress the book of life and death. In an instant, the surrounding void completely collapsed. The book of life and death exuded a terrifying aura of death. The ancient seal scripts seemed to have come to life. The aura of death was like a huge wave that rushed forward. For a moment, Celestial Venerable Zhang Long's Divine Will Incarnation was up against Grand Supreme's Divine Will Incarnation, and the nameless remnant soul was up against the replica of the Book of Life and Death. This kind of battle, this kind of competition, Jane, is simply, Whooshing Crocodile's heart palpitated. Such a battle was simply too terrifying. Even so, the four of them were either divine sense incarnations, remnant souls, or saint tool replicas. Their strength was not even 1/10,000th of the original body's strength. It was simply shocking. Boom, boom, boom. The intense battle shook the entire extreme Yin Temple. The entire world seemed to be collapsing, as if it would be destroyed in the next moment. Swish! Suddenly, a ray of death light shot out from the Book of Life and Death and entered Concealed Arrow King's body. Destruction of space. Destruction of a mortal. A hazy voice came from the Book of Life and Death. Concealed Arrow King trembled, then looked surprised. He bowed to the Book of Life and Death from afar. Yes, Lord Sacred King. The next moment, he looked at Wu Yi. His eyes were extremely cold and cruel. Lin Tian was right next to him. He saw the ray of death light fly out of the Book of Life and Death and enter Concealed Arrow King's body. Hearing the voice from the Book of Life and Death and seeing Concealed Arrow King's cold and cruel eyes, he immediately had an ominous feeling. Almost at the same time he had this ominous feeling, the entire subduing Arrow Hall and extreme Yin Temple began to tremble. In the distance, Concealed Arrow King's aura surged. An ancient seal appeared between his eyebrows, emitting a terrifying aura of death. In the name of the King's seal, the power of extreme Yin and the power of Concealed Arrow gather. Boom! The entire great heaven and earth quaked as an inexhaustible power of death, blood, and evil rolled and gathered together. Roar! Roar! The roar of death filled the vast nine heavens. As far as the eye could see, numerous cracks appeared in the void. Numerous armored soldiers flew out, and in the blink of an eye, they gathered into a densely packed area. There were at least a few million of them, and all of them were exuding extremely terrifying fluctuations. The fluctuations of death, blood, and evil were like a terrifying ocean that could destroy the heavens. At the same time, a bell rang. A huge yellow bell flew out from one of the cracks. Ancient runes intertwined on it fell. When the bell rang, Lin Tian and the others all trembled. It was as if their souls were about to shatter. Their wills also weakened in an instant, as if they were about to dissipate. The bell from back then, Lin Tian remembered this bell. When he first entered Extreme Yin Temple, the bell rang from the heavenly palace of death, forcefully pulling in a group of cultivators who were sucked in. The bell from back then was clearly the same as the one from this yellow bell. The only difference was that the bell this time was clearly much louder than the one he had heard back then. Without a doubt, this was definitely a supreme treasure of Extreme Yin Temple. It possessed unimaginable power. Space shook violently. Strands of strange ancient runes rushed out from the dense cracks, intertwining with the power of the laws of life and death. At the same time, endless power of darkness surged over. The entire Extreme Yin Temple and Concealed Arrow Palace began to boil. In the blink of an eye, this place had truly darkened. A few million armored soldiers, a yellow bell, a dense expanse of divine markings of life and death, peerlessly vast, baleful energy, evil energy, and various other terrifying energies had converged together before gradually fusing together to form an extremely shocking fluctuation. The fluctuation was terrifying to the extreme, with the King's Seal gathering all the power of extreme Een Temple and concealed Arrow Palace, with the soul-reaping bell as the core and the life and death runes as the veins. All the power of extreme Een Temple and concealed Arrow Palace has gathered here and merged into one. It's enough to kill an ordinary half-step great god. King Concealed Arrow's eyes were cruel, and his voice was cold. He stared coldly at Wu Yi. Die. As soon as he finished speaking, the ancient seal between his eyebrows glowed. He controlled all the power of extreme Een Temple and concealed Arrow Palace that had gathered here. It pressed down on Wu Yi with a truly destructive force. It also enveloped little Taichu, Lin Tian, and the others. In the distance, at the top of the sky, Celestial Lord Zonglong, who was fighting with Grand Supreme's divine consciousness, immediately abandoned Grand Supreme's divine consciousness clone and stepped toward Wu Yi. At the same time, Wu Ming's remnant soul gave up on the battle of life and death. He controlled the ancient stone coffin and rushed toward Wu Yi. Whether it's the space or the royal family of deity spirit, they're all huge threats. I'll eliminate them all. I won't let you save them. Grand Supreme's voice was indifferent as he stopped Celestial Lord Zonglong. Die. A hazy voice came from the book of life and death. The power of life and death surged out, restraining Wu Ming's remnant soul. The sky shook violently and divine power surged. Celestial Lord Zonglong and Wu Ming's remnant soul were both stopped. They couldn't escape in a short time. Boom! Turbulent, destructive energy surged. Millions of armored soldiers, soul-reaping bell, life and death runes, endless power of blood and darkness. At this moment, the power of extreme Een Temple and concealed Arrow Palace merged into one. It really seemed to be able to destroy everything. In the blink of an eye, Concealed Arrow King controlled this terrifying power and merged it with the concealed arrow drum. He directly pressed down on Wu Yi and the others. Lin Tian and Wu Yi stood together, facing this power that was enough to destroy ordinary half-step divine emperors. They felt chills all over their bodies, and Shui and Wuxing Crocodile couldn't stop trembling. Little Taichu stayed on Wu Yi's shoulder. All the hair on its body stood on end. Wu Yi raised her hand and gently rubbed the little guy's head, calming it down immediately. Her hand was delicate and gentle, and her expression was still calm. Her divine will, as gentle as the sound of a zither, floated in all directions. In heaven and on earth, only I reign supreme. Boom! For the first time, a domineering pressure spread out from her seemingly delicate body. The entire sky changed color, and the entire world seemed to have become her domain. A destructive spatial ripple spread out in the boundless space with her as the center. Everything in the entire world came to a standstill in an instant. In the next moment, a light gust of wind blew by, and a series of soft hissing sounds resounded. The millions of armored soldiers, the soul-reaping bell, the concealed arrow drum, the divine crest of life and death, the boundless baleful aura of blood, and the evil aura of Een collapsed in unison, and they transformed into ash and light mist that filled the sky in the blink of an eye. Space order. Concealed Arrow King's eyes were filled with endless fear. In the next moment, his body collapsed and turned into dust that scattered with the wind. Lin Tian was almost completely stunned. He looked at the picturesque Wu Yi beside him and couldn't swallow a single word. A power that could easily annihilate an ordinary half-step god emperor was actually annihilated by Wu Yi in an instant. Even Concealed Arrow King was annihilated in body and soul. She was only a half-step divine emperor, but she could actually display such terrifying power. This was equivalent to killing a half-step divine emperor with the cultivation of a half-step divine emperor. Moreover, it had only taken an instant, and Shui, whooshing crocodile, and little Taichu were also stunned. It was as if they had lost their souls and their consciousness. At the same time, Celestial Master Zonglong, the nameless remnant soul, Grand Supreme, and the Book of Life and Death stopped in their tracks and looked at Wu Yi. They were either shocked or trembling. In terms of talent, she's comparable to Master. This Celestial Master Zonglong lost his composure for the first time. Kill, we must kill her. Otherwise, she'll be the second human king. Grand Supreme's voice was extremely cold. For the first time, he revealed a strong, murderous intent. Chapter 16:12. A half-step Divine Emperor could kill a half-step Divine Emperor. Even the ancient Grand Supreme and the Lord of Hell, Saint King Luan Zhuan, were shocked. Their murderous intent reached its peak at this moment, and they immediately pounced on Wu Yi. They felt a great threat. They definitely couldn't allow such a person to live. Otherwise, there would be a great disaster in the future. Don't even think about it. Celestial Venerable Zonglong naturally saw what the Grand Supreme and the Book of Life and Death wanted to do. He immediately stepped forward. The true dragon formed by the dragon markings roared and pressed down on the Grand Supreme and Saint King Luan Zhuan with an earth-shattering force. At the same time, the nameless remnant soul controlled the ancient sarcophagus. Its aura instantly soared, and it almost turned into a demon god of destruction. It charged towards the Grand Supreme and the Book of Life and Death together with Celestial Venerable Zonglong, bombarding them with destructive divine light. However, the Grand Supreme and the Book of Life and Death were too fast. They dodged the attacks of the two and went straight for Wu Yi. As the two closed in, a terrifying murderous aura descended, causing Lin Tian and the others to shiver. Just the aura of the two made them unable to move at this moment. Qin Shue pierced through them. A gentle voice rang out. A jade flute appeared beside Wu Yi. Like a spear, it turned into a bolt of lightning and flew out, covering thousands of miles in an instant. Ka! Pooh! With two soft sounds, the Book of Life and Death was directly pierced through. Then, the Grand Supreme's incarnation's chest was also directly pierced through. They were both sent flying by a strong force. Instantly, the pressure on Lin Tian and Shui disappeared without a trace. They could move again. They were all shocked, speechless. Subconsciously, they thought that the Grand Supreme's incarnation and the replica of the Book of Life and Death were stronger than the one summoned by Concealed Arrow King. They should be comparable to a peak half-step Divine Emperor and could defeat anyone below the Divine Emperor level. However, they didn't expect that these two ancient existences would be injured by Wu Yi in one move. This kind of fighting strength was beyond the concept of cultivation level. They couldn't imagine or understand how a half-step Divine Emperor could be so strong. At the same time, Celestial Zonglong was astonished. He looked at Wu Yi, his eyes twinkling. You've surpassed the Tao. Not only did you comprehend it, but you've also mastered it. You're only a half-step godly emperor, and you're already this powerful existence from the primordial antiquity era was shocked. However, in the next moment, he calmed himself down. His deep eyes looked at the Zenith incarnation and the replica of the Book of Life and Death, who had been injured and pushed back by Wu Yi. He then took a step toward them. Roar! The dragon's roar reverberated through the heavens and the earth. A true dragon that was tens of thousands of feet long circled around his body. It was completely formed by dragon patterns and looked as if it was real. The might of the dragon that was almost tangible was vast and mighty. It immediately enveloped the Taishang sect and the Life and Death book. At the same time, the nameless remnant soul also attacked. All kinds of divine patterns intertwined and turned into divine waves that drowned the Taishang incarnation and the Life and Death book. Boom! That place directly turned into a place of destruction. The entire sky was collapsing. The Taishang incarnation and the Life and Death book had just been injured by Wu Yi when they faced such a destructive attack. They were immediately injured again and were directly blasted from the sky into the ground. Celestial Lord Zonglong and the nameless remnant soul did not stop. They did not give the Taishang incarnation and the life and death book any time to breathe. They directly pressed forward again. For a moment, the two destructive divine powers once again fell on them with a rumbling sound. The momentum was extremely terrifying. Boom! Boom! Two powerful forces surged. The Taishang incarnation and the life and death book broke free from the destructive attacks of Celestial Lord Zonglong and the nameless remnant soul. They were both severely injured. The Taishang incarnation tilted his head and looked at Wu Yi. His deep eyes were even colder, and the murderous intent in them became even more intense. The Taishang incinerates the world, he said coldly. In an instant, the dim light outside his body became extremely intense, and the entire world collapsed. The turbulent, destructive aura was vast and mighty. It was not attacking Celestial Lord Zonglong and the nameless remnant soul. Instead, it was still pressing down on Wu Yi. Obviously, this was not an ordinary attack, but an extremely terrifying magical power. Dragon Burial World. A calm voice sounded, and the peerless dragon's roar resounded through the 9 heavens. Celestial Lord Zonglong stepped forward, and 9 true dragons appeared in succession. Each of them was intertwined with an aura that could bury all things. In an instant, they blocked the destructive magical power of the Taishang incarnation that was pressing down on Wu Yi. The two collided and directly exploded, turning the world there into the most primitive chaos. Rotation of life and death. A hazy voice came from the life and death book. The power of life and death surged, and the fluctuations of the way and the precepts could no longer be sensed. However, it was still extremely terrifying. The power that it emitted was not inferior to the magical power that the Taishang incarnation and Celestial Lord Zonglong had used. Like the Taishang incarnation, it was not attacking Celestial Lord Zonglong and the nameless remnant soul. It was also pressing down on Wu Yi. Obviously, at this time, in the eyes of these two ancient existences, killing Wu Yi was the most important thing. No name, no beginning. For the first time, the nameless remnant soul spoke, and it was as hazy as the voice that came from the life and death book. The ancient sarcophagus behind it shook, and a terrifying aura that could swallow heaven and earth surged out, blocking the magical power of the life and death book. With a boom, the two collided in the blink of an eye. The result was like the collision between the Taishang incarnation and Celestial Lord Zonglong's magical power. It directly turned the surroundings into the most primitive chaos, and it was difficult to recover for a long time. Taishang, Saint King Linjuan, don't waste your energy. You want to kill her with just a divine consciousness incarnation and a wisp of spiritual consciousness in the replica life and death book? You're too arrogant. Even if you attack together now, you'll only be crushed by her in the end. Celestial Lord Zonglong's eyes were deep, and his voice was calm. He walked step by step toward the Taishang incarnation. An endless dragon pattern surrounded him, making him seem unapproachable. At the same time, the nameless remnant soul was even more direct. Endless blood rushed out from the ancient sarcophagus behind it, and it instantly turned into a blood river, enveloping the Taishang incarnation and Saint King Linjuan at the same time. It was extremely powerful and domineering. The Taishang's true face couldn't be seen, and only a pair of extremely cold eyes could be seen. A huge demonic shadow appeared behind him, and it went against the sky to attack the nameless blood sea. The endless life and death aura from the life and death book bombarded the nameless blood sea together with the demonic shadow behind the Taishang incarnation. Celestial Lord Zonglong stepped forward and formed a seal with one hand. A dragon sword appeared behind him, and it slashed down at the Taishang incarnation and the life and death book as if it was going to kill the heavens. Boom! 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 A violent explosion resounded in all directions. The Taishang incarnation and the life and death book were completely restrained by Celestial Lord Zonglong and the nameless remnant soul. The four of them collided, and the aura was terrifying. The battle was extremely intense, but Lin Tian and the others were looking at Wu Yi at this moment. Wu Yi was too strong. That kind of strength had exceeded the scope of their understanding. Even Lin Tian, who had always been calm, was shocked to the point of being stunned. Whoosh! A faint light flashed past with pure white light, and it pierced through the Life and Death Book and the Taishang Incarnation's jade flute. It circled around Wu Yi and turned into a faint light that entered Wu Yi's body, disappearing without a trace. The flute at that time, a faint light flashed in Lin Tian's eyes. It wasn't the first time he saw this jade flute. He had seen it in the 10-direction sky domain. At that time, he had reached the Emperor realm in the Netherworld race's sealed dust domain, and it was difficult for him to pass the Emperor tribulation. Wu Yi took out this jade flute at that time and played a melodious tune, which instantly increased his battle strength by dozens of times. Wuxing Crocodile and Little Taichu had naturally seen this jade flute as well. When Wu Yi played the flute to help Lin Tian pass the Emperor tribulation, they were also there. Too powerful. Sister Wu Yi, you're like a god. No, even a god can't compare to you. And Shui recovered from the shock at this moment. She clenched her fists tightly and looked at Wu Yi with excitement and admiration. Facing her burning gaze, Wu Yi gently nodded. Yeah. Little Taichu was extremely happy. It was as excited as in Shui. Its big eyes curved in a crescent as it intimately rubbed Wu Yi's cheeks. Wu Yi was very quiet, but when facing Little Taichu, she would always smile and gently rub the little fellow's little head. Wuxing Crocodile looked at Wu Yi in shock. It took a few deep breaths before turning around. Then, it whispered in Lin Tian's ear, "Kid, are you under a lot of pressure?" Lin Tian. He tilted his head and looked at Wu Yi. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This woman, who he felt so familiar with from the first time they met, really couldn't have a single flaw. Whether it was appearance or strength, they could only be described as perfect. If he really had to forcefully pick out a flaw, in the words of the Violet Fairy, it would be that she was too perfect. Wu Yi tilted her head and looked at him. She didn't say anything. She just looked at Lin Tian very quietly, because she could feel that Lin Tianyi was looking straight at her. Lin Tian blushed with shame. Even though he was already used to Wu Yi's reticence, he still felt a little speechless at this time. Nothing. I just feel that you're too powerful. You've mastered the second-ranked Eternal Space Divine Tao, and you can even kill enemies who are a major realm above you. He smiled wryly. Wu Yi's strength deeply shocked him. He really could only smile wryly. Wu Yi looked on quietly. After a pause, she said softly, "Your Tao is stronger than mine." Lin Tian's expression changed slightly when he heard this, and Shui and Wuxing Crocodile were also moved. When they heard Wu Yi's words, they couldn't help but be shocked. How is that possible? And Shui's eyes widened. As far as she knew, the Eternal Divine Tao was the most powerful Tao. It was divided into time, space, and life and death. Wu Yi mastered the second-ranked Eternal Divine Tao space. Only time was stronger than space. Could Lin Tian have mastered the first-ranked Eternal Divine Tao time? Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi. He naturally knew that the Tao Wu Yi mentioned was his nameless Great Tao. Do you know what Tao it is? He asked Wu Yi. Yes. Wu Yi nodded lightly. What is it? Lin Tian hurriedly asked. She was the second person who knew what his nameless Great Tao was. He really wanted to know what that Tao was. Wu Yi looked at him. She was very quiet. After a pause, she shook her head lightly. Chapter 16:13. Seeing Wu Yi shake his head, Lin Tian naturally knew that Wu Yi did not intend to tell him the answer. He could not help but frown. Why? He asked. Back then, an old drunkard clearly knew what his Tao was, but he did not tell him the answer. It's not good for you, Wu Yi said. Hearing this, Lin Tian could not help but frown again. However, after thinking about it, he finally sighed slightly and did not ask anymore. Although he was very curious about this matter and wanted to know what his nameless Tao law was, Since an old drunkard and Wu Yi did not tell him, they obviously had their own considerations and were doing it for his own good. Next to him, and Shui looked surprised. He looked at Wu Yi for a while and then looked at Lin Tian for a while. It was really unbelievable. Lin Tian's Dao was actually more powerful than space. Wuxing Crocodile and Lin Tianyi knew that the Dao Wu Yi mentioned referred to Lin Tian's nameless Dao law. At this time, they were also surprised like in Shui. It always knew that Lin Tian's nameless Dao law was very powerful, but it did not expect it to be so powerful. It was actually more powerful than the legendary space. Moreover, these words came from Wu Yi, who could instantly kill a half-step Emperor God. The only Dao that is more powerful than space is time. However, Brat Lin's Dao is obviously not time. Then what is it? It was very surprised. Boom! At the top of the sky, the terrifying divine power was vast and mighty. The confrontation between Grand Supreme, Celestial Venerable Zonglong, Book of Life and Death, and the nameless remnant soul was extremely shocking. The eyes of Lin Tian and the others were immediately attracted. It was really difficult to watch a battle of this level. Boom! 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 The light of destruction was vast and mighty. The four of them were not in their original form, but their strength was shocking. Every time they collided, it was as if they were going to destroy the world. The space formed by the extreme In Hall and the ambushing Arrow Hall was originally much sturdier than the space of the Immortal Region. However, under their battle, it was now extremely fragile. Many places were cracking and crumbling. Bang! A dull thud was heard as the Great Supreme Incarnation was sent flying by the Celestial Venerate Zonglong. The Divine Will body became slightly transparent. Grand Elder, you can't do it anymore. Celestial Venerate Zonglong's voice was calm. The sky was filled with intertwining dragon patterns. The Celestial Venerate Dragon Zonglong walked slowly, but every step he took caused the sky to tremble. It was as if it was going to collapse in the next moment. The Grand Elder's eyes were deep and cold. He glanced in the direction of Wu Yi, and the murderous intent in his eyes was hard to hide. He had suffered serious injuries after being penetrated by Wu Yi's jade flute. His aura was weaker than Heaven Venerate Dragon Zhang's. He did not say anything. His eyes were cold and indifferent. Once again, a demonic shadow appeared behind him and attacked the Celestial Venerate Dragon Zonglong. At the same time, not far away, the Book of Life and Death and the nameless remnant soul were fighting. All kinds of light of destruction surged, and the aura of death seemed to be annihilating everything. Lin Tian watched the battle from afar. His eyes flickered. These people were really too strong. Just the Divine Will Incarnation, the replica sacred weapon with a wisp of spiritual consciousness, or the remnant soul can have such an aura. How strong are their real bodies? They are definitely in the divine Emperor realm. Wuxing Crocodile could not help but tremble. It's terrifying. And Shui shrunk his neck, then looked at Wu Yi and said, however, Sister Wu Yi is still the most powerful. She can kill a half-step divine Emperor realm expert in an instant. In the future, she will be able to kill a divine Emperor realm expert in the divine Emperor realm. She is much stronger than these people. She looked at Wu Yi with admiration. Hearing this, Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi. He could not help but be shocked. A half-step divine Emperor realm expert could kill a half-step divine Emperor realm expert in an instant. This kind of strength and aptitude was really difficult to describe. He could not find any words to describe it. He took a deep breath and looked at the sky again. He watched Celestial Venerable Zonglong, Grand Supreme, and the nameless remnant soul fight against the Life and Death Book. A battle at this level was very terrifying, but it was also very valuable. For a cultivator at his level, watching such a battle would definitely be very beneficial for his future cultivation. He would be able to comprehend a lot of the true essence of cultivation from it. At the same time, and Shui and Wuxing Crocodile also knew this. At this time, they were seriously watching the battle in front of them. Even little Taichu was no exception. Boom! 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 Terrifying divine might roared. The whole sky was collapsing. Both the extreme Een Palace and the subduing Arrow Palace were collapsing. In the blink of an eye, the four of them had been fighting fiercely for more than 6 hours. However, their auras did not weaken much. It was as if their divine might was unlimited. However, even so, the subtle gap between the four of them could be seen by those who were slightly discerning. The incarnation of the Great Supreme and the replica of the Book of Life and Death are at a disadvantage. If they continue to fight fiercely, they will only be crushed. Lin Tian on Dao. Wuxing Crocodile nodded and agreed. This is mainly because of Wu Yi's attack. Lin Tian was naturally aware of this. He continued to watch the battle between the four great existences in the sky. Most of his attention was on Celestial Venerate Zhang Long. After all, he possessed Celestial Venerate Zhang Long's dragon burial scripture. Roars! The dragon's roar was ear-piercing and shook the 9 heavens. Dragon marks surrounded the dragon burial scripture, and only his eyes could be seen. They were deep and calm. As he took a step, the dragon marks intertwined with the true dragon and collided with the divine might of the Great Supreme. His body was straight and slender, but his aura seemed to be able to swallow mountains and rivers. With every step he took, the meridian mark of heaven and earth resonated with him. Bang! Once again, the Great Supreme was knocked back, and his body became even fainter. However, there was no anger in his eyes. He was still cold and indifferent, and the dark light around his body was vast and mighty. The dragon burial scripture did not say anything and pressed towards the Great Supreme again. I'll also join in. A cold voice sounded. The peak of the sky cracked open, and monstrous nether energy surged. Another hazy figure stepped out, and his aura was extremely strong. The dragon burial scripture stopped and looked at the person who came. His eyes were still calm. Nether King. As soon as these words were said, Lin Tian and Shui and Wuxing Crocodile not far away were shocked. Nether King? The Lord of the Underworld? A hint of shock appeared in Lin Tian's eyes. The Underworld, like hell, was a super big world before the Primordial Age. It was even bigger than the Celestial Realm. It was rumored that it was destroyed before the Primordial Age. No one expected the Nether King, the former Lord of the Underworld, to step into this place. This is a gathering of ancient monsters from the Primordial Age, and Shui widened her eyes. First, it was the Lord of Hell who controlled the Book of Life and Death. Then, it was the first forbidden god before the Primordial Age. Then it was the Grand Supreme, and then the Dragon Burial Scripture. Now, even the Lord of the Underworld before the Primordial Age had jumped out. This sent chills down her spine. In the sky, endless nether energy surrounded the Nether King's body as if it could devour everything in the world. His gaze fell on the Dragon Burial Scripture, and then he glanced at the Nameless Remnant Soul. Burial Scripture, Nameless, you two juniors are not bad. You didn't die back then, and now you've reached such heights. As he spoke, he took a step toward the Dragon Burial Scripture and the Nameless Remnant Soul. The nether light turned into a light that could end all things and press down on the Dragon Burial Scripture and the Nameless Remnant Soul. Back then, you destroyed my underworld. Today, I'll cripple your divine consciousness and remnant souls to collect some interest. As soon as he said that, Lin Tian and the others were shocked again. The ancient underworld before the Primordial Age, which was even bigger than the Celestial Realm, was destroyed. It was actually led by the Dragon Burial Scripture and the Nameless. Boom! The nether light rolled and turned into a huge wave of the Nether Sea. It pressed down on the Dragon Burial Scripture and the Nameless Remnant Soul. This nether light was extremely terrifying. It was as if the underworld before the Primordial Age had appeared and pressed down. The aura was extremely terrifying. Buzz! Silver divine light descended from the sky, and a huge divine diagram drew out from the void. It intertwined with the aura of sealing all things and immediately met the Nether King's endless nether light. In the blink of an eye, it dissipated and then pressed down on the Nether King without slowing down. This is... Lin Tian's pupil shrank. Whooshing crocodile's eyes widened. For symbol seal? The silver divine diagram broke through the Nether King and appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. The Nether King raised his hand and smashed it into pieces with a slap. Then he raised his head and looked at the place where the silver diagram drew out. There another slender figure stepped out. His entire body was intertwined in silver divine light. Like the dragon burial scripture, his face couldn't be seen clearly. Only a pair of deep eyes could be seen. Feng Shun, the Nether King said in a deep voice. His eyes were cold. At the same time, the Book of Life and Death vibrated slightly. The Grand Supreme's eyes turned cold. Before the primordial age, the dragon burial scripture and the nameless were not as powerful as them. However, the person in front of them was different. He was their formidable opponent before the primordial age. Senior brother, the dragon burial scripture said softly to the slender figure that appeared. This scene shocked Lin Tian and Whooshing Crocodile again. That is Feng Shen Tianzuan, right? He is also a reincarnation? He is the dragon burial scripture's senior brother? Whooshing Crocodile's eyes widened. Then he came up with a ridiculous guess. Are the 9 celestial masters all reincarnated? Moreover, they belong to the same lineage? Lin Tian looked at the slender figure that appeared in the sky. He did use the 4-symbol seal. Moreover, the Nether King said the word Feng Shun. Without a doubt, he was one of the 9 celestial masters, Feng Shen Tianzuan. At this moment, the dragon burial scripture, who was also one of the 9 celestial masters, called him senior brother. It was easy for people to think that the 9 celestial masters belonged to the same lineage. And Shui also widened his eyes and looked at the dragon burial scripture and Feng Shen Tianzuan in the sky. Then, he looked at Lin Tian with an incomprehensible expression. Why do you know all their techniques? Chapter 16:14. And Shui stared at celestial venerable Zhang Long, Feng Shen Tianzuan, and then at Lin Tian. Lin Tian actually knew the techniques of these 2 ancient existences. Moreover, it just so happened that these 2 ancient existences were from the same lineage, and they were fellow disciples. She truly felt that it was quite strange. I just happened to learn them. Lin Tiandao. He looked at the top of the sky, and his gaze fell on Feng Shen Tianzuan and celestial venerable Zhang Long. These 2 legendary figures of the 10 directions celestial domain appeared in this place together. Both of them had extraordinary backgrounds, so he naturally paid attention to them. Almost as soon as he looked at the sky, Feng Shen Tianzuan's gaze moved and looked in his direction. His face was hard to see clearly as it was very blurry. A strange light flashed in his eyes, and he seemed to be frowning slightly. Senior brother, what did you see? Celestial Venerable Zhang Long looked at Lin Tian and then at Feng Shen Tianzuan. He transmitted his voice to him. Feng Shen Tianzuan shook his head and retracted his gaze from Lin Tian. He looked at Netherworld King, Taishang, and the Book of Life and Death. In the next moment, with a boom, a powerful divine power rushed out from his body. He didn't say anything and walked toward Netherworld King, Taishang, and the Book of Life and Death. Wang! The silver 4-symbol seal rushed out from behind him, covering the sky and the sun. At the same time, it enveloped Netherworld King, Taishang, and the Book of Life and Death. Netherworld King snorted. Vast underworld lights surged, and underworld beasts appeared all over the sky. They roared at the sky and rushed toward Feng Shen Tianzuan. Taishang and the Book of Life and Death attacked at the same time. The black light and the aura of death intertwined and pressed down on Feng Shen Tianzuan. Feng Shen Tianzuan was fighting 1 against 3. His silver 4 symbols Dao diagram suddenly split into 3. All kinds of strange patterns were intertwined on it, and they pressed toward Netherworld King, Taishang, and the Book of Life and Death. Then the 3 divided into 4 layers. Each layer was intertwined with the terrifying power of sealing and annihilation. It seemed to be able to seal and suppress heaven and earth. Netherworld King, Taishang, and the Book of Life and Death seemed to know how terrifying this supernatural power was. Although the three attacked Fengshen Tianzuan at the same time and had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, they didn't dare to be careless at this time. After unleashing all kinds of killing lights, the light of the divine power was stronger than before, and in the space of the void all collapsed. Space collapsed. Boom! All types of destructive auras pervaded the air. All types of radiance extended outwards, divine might oppressing the world. And Taishang, and book, Taishang and Taishang, and the Taishang 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 and the Taishang, the Taishang, Taishang, and the Taishang, Taishang, and the Taishang, Taishang, and the book and Taishang death, Taishang, and the Taishang and the Taitais and it, Tawi, it. Then, the four symbols Tao diagram that had fused into one split into three divine diagrams again, attacking the Taishang and the other two. As expected of Fengshen Tianzuan, the way he used the four-symbol seal is really amazing. Wuxing Crocodile looked at Fengshen Tianzuan in the sky, and his eyes could not help but flicker a little. Then he paused and said, "However, in terms of understanding and application of this technique, it seems that he is still lacking compared to your abnormal master." "I do feel that way." Lin Tian felt the same way. At this time, Fengshen Tianzuan's four-symbol seal was incomparably frightening. The four-symbol seal was also very stunning. He was far from being able to compare with Fengshen Tianzuan's four-symbol seal. However, it felt like even the powerful Fengshen Tianzuan was far behind an old drunkard in terms of understanding and application of the four-symbol seal. This surprised him a little. "That's why I said that your master is simply abnormal. His understanding and application of other people's techniques have surpassed others, and it's not just by 1 or 2 levels." The five-element crocodile said, "This feeling is as if Empyrean Divine Seal learned the four-symbol seal from that freakish master of yours, and he didn't learn it completely. Buzz! Silver Divine Light intertwined, and the four-symbol seal covered the sky. The tyrannical aura of the seal covered every corner. As the divine light intertwined and flashed, the deathly aura of many places in the gloomy and dark extreme Een Temple and subduing Arrow Palace instantly dissipated, like small ice cubes encountering a monstrous fire. They melted in the blink of an eye, and then evaporated. So strong. And Shui trembled. "Yeah." On Wu Yi's shoulder, little Taichu also opened his eyes wide. Wu Yi was very calm from beginning to end. In this world, there was really nothing that could make her so emotional. Boom! At the peak of the sky, Fengshen Tianzuan was fighting against Grand Supreme, Lord of Hell, and the Book of Life and Death. The four-symbol seal was cast by him, and it could be said to be amazing. It was just a simple Tao diagram, but it could always produce unexpected power. For a moment, Grand Supreme, Lord of Hell, and the Book of Life and Death, these three ancient existences, were all tied up by him. No name, no beginning. The nameless remnant soul spoke again and drove the stone coffin forward, filling the sky with black light. Celestial Venerable Zhang Long didn't rush forward, but at this time, he retreated dozens of feet. Then, without any obvious movement, the sky was suddenly filled with dragon patterns, and they quickly disappeared into the void, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Seeing this scene, Lin Tian moved the dragon burial scripture in his body, and the eye of Delusion Breaker involuntarily opened. He was immediately moved. He saw that the dragon patterns that disappeared were now surging toward every corner of extreme Een Temple and subduing Arrow Palace from the void. Each dragon pattern seemed to be the source of destruction, containing the power of annihilation. Is this the dragon burial array? To completely destroy extreme Een Temple and subduing Arrow Palace. His heart skipped a beat. Extreme Een Temple and subduing Arrow Palace were 2 of the 11 holy palaces of hell, and it was difficult for an ordinary emperor god to completely destroy them. Otherwise, these 2 holy palaces wouldn't have been able to survive when hell was destroyed. However, it was also because of the battle that destroyed hell that the 2 divine palaces had suffered a lot of damage. Now, even though celestial Venerable Zonglong was just an incarnation of his divine will, he could rely on the dragon burial scripture, a peerless divine art, to spread the dragon patterns all over the corners of the extreme Een Temple and the ambushing Arrow Hall to form a dragon burial array. After that, he could definitely destroy the two divine palaces of hell. Although he had heard from Celestial Venerable Zonglong that he was going to destroy extreme Een Temple and subduing Arrow Palace, he couldn't help but be surprised when he saw Celestial Venerable Zonglong putting his plan into action and laying a dragon burial array in the large space that was built by extreme Een Temple and subduing Arrow Palace to destroy them. While he was watching Celestial Venerable Zonglong interweave dense dragon patterns to every corner of extreme Een Temple and subduing Arrow Palace, Celestial Venerable Zonglong naturally noticed his gaze and raised his head slightly to look in his direction. Celestial Venerable Zonglong's appearance was difficult to see clearly, and only a pair of eyes could be seen. They were very deep, and there were wisps of strange light intertwining in his eyes. The next moment, this ancient existence from the primordial age stretched out his hand and flicked his finger. A ray of dragon light flew out and pierced through a space tunnel, leading directly to the outside of extreme Een Temple and subduing Arrow Palace. One could vaguely see the vast sky of the outside world. The creatures that were involved in this place have all been moved out by Senior Brother. Now, only you are left. He looked at Lin Tian and said, "Leave this place with the girl beside you and your friends as soon as possible." Lin Tian's expression changed. His delusion breaker divine I had seen through many things. At this moment, Celestial Venerable Zonglong had released more dragon patterns and sent them to every corner of extreme Een Temple and subduing Arrow Palace. He was going to destroy extreme Een Temple and subduing Arrow Palace later, so he wanted them to leave now to ensure their safety. Dragon light also intertwined in his eyes. He looked at Wu Yi and said, "Let's go." Wu Yi didn't care about anything in this place. Hearing Lin Tian's words, he nodded slightly. Lin Tian then called out to Shui, Wuxing Crocodile, and Little Tai Chu. The group directly stepped into the space tunnel that Celestial Venerable Zonglong had created and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the top of the sky, Grand Supreme watched as Wu Yi and Lin Tian's group disappeared. Wisps of faint cold light intertwined in his eyes. Buzz! The silver Tao diagram of the four symbols flashed past with the power to annihilate all things. It almost cut off Grand Supreme's head. Fengshen Tianzuan looked in the direction where Lin Tian's group disappeared. His eyes became more and more profound. Then he retracted his gaze. The seal of the four symbols became stronger. The power of the seal and the power of annihilation intertwined. The aura was so strong that it was terrifying. The dazzling Tao diagram enveloped Grand Supreme, the Book of Life and Death, and the Lord of Hell at the same time. It attacked the three existences at the same time. Boom! The nameless remnant soul was domineering and direct. Black light covered the sky and earth. It cooperated with Fengshen Tianzuan to attack. In another position, Celestial Venerable Zonglong looked in the direction where Lin Tian's group disappeared. The strange light in his eyes became stronger, and there was a hint of doubt. However, in the next moment, the strange light and doubt in his eyes disappeared. Once again, they returned to being deep and calm. Buzz! Dense dragon patterns circled out and hid in the void, spreading to every corner of the subduing Arrow Hall of the extreme Een Palace. At the peak of the sky, outside the Book of Life and Death, an endless amount of death aura surged. At this time, it obviously saw what Celestial Venerable Zonglong was doing. The surging power of life and death rolled. It gave up on Fengshen Tianzuan and the nameless remnant soul and rushed straight toward Celestial Venerable Zonglong. Fengshen Tianzuan waved his hand. A silver Tao diagram of the four symbols silently appeared in front of the Book of Life and Death. It was like a part of the sky was pressing down, directly restraining the Book of Life and Death, making it temporarily unable to escape and interfere with Celestial Venerable Zonglong, God's seal. A hazy voice came from the Book of Life and death. At this moment, it was filled with cold intent. Fengshen Tianzuan's eyes were calm. The nameless remnant's soul attacked together. The Grand Supreme, the Lord of Hell, and the Book of Life and Death firmly restrained the three of them in a fixed area. No matter how strong the three of them were, it was difficult for them to escape in a short time. It was also at this time that outside the extreme Yin Palace and the subduing Arrow Hall, not far away, the space cracked open. Lin Tian, Wu Yi, and the others stepped out and reappeared under the sky of the celestial region. "We're out. It's still more comfortable outside." Whooshing Crocodile took a deep breath and then looked at a place 10,000 feet away. Lin Tian was also looking in that direction. At this time, in a place 10,000 feet away from them, there was a huge divine hall in the sky. It was surrounded by a frightening Yin fog. It was the extreme Yin Palace, and the subduing Arrow Hall was located within the extreme Yin Palace. "Wu Yi, can you let us see the situation inside?" Chapter 16:15. There were a few ancient existences fighting in the extreme Yin Temple and the ambushing Arrow Hall, including Fengshen Tianzuan and Celestial Venerable Zonglong. Therefore, Lin Tian was very concerned about the battle and wanted to see the final outcome. Wu Yi nodded, and a light screen appeared silently in front of him. It was like a divine mirror, and soon, images appeared. It was the battle between the extreme Yin Temple and the 6 ancient existences, including Fengshen Tianzuan, in the ambushing Arrow Hall. Through the light screen, one could see various kinds of divine light surging in the extreme Yin Temple and the aura of destruction spreading in all directions. Fengshen Tianzuan and the nameless remnant soul restrained the Grand Supreme, Pluto, and the Book of Life and Death. They fought until the sky collapsed. Roar! The dragon's roar shook the sky. After dozens of breaths, Celestial Venerable Zonglong moved. At this moment, he stepped into the battlefield at the top of the sky. The true dragon formed by the dragon patterns roared and rolled toward the Grand Supreme, Pluto, and the Book of Life and Death at the same time. Then he raised his hand and formed a seal. The entire extreme Yin Temple and the ambushing Arrow Hall shook. Dragon patterns appeared in every corner and turned into an extremely vast dragon burial array. It extracted the power of the extreme Yin Temple and the ambushing Arrow Hall and turned them into destructive dragons that rushed toward the battlefield at the top of the sky. They drowned the Grand Supreme, Pluto, and the Book of Life and Death. Moreover, at the same time, gloomy light erupted from many places in extreme Yin Temple and ambushing Arrow Hall. Cracks appeared one after another, as if a terrifying earthquake had occurred. The entire extreme Yin Temple and ambushing Arrow Hall began to collapse. No wonder he's Celestial Venerable Zonglong. He used the dragon burial scripture to extract the power of the extreme Yin Temple and the ambushing Arrow Hall for himself to attack the Grand Supreme, Pluto, and the Book of Life and Death. He even used it to destroy the extreme Yin Temple and the ambushing Arrow Hall. He's really... Whooshing Crocodile's heart palpitated. Lin Tian was also shocked. Extreme Yin Temple and ambushing Arrow Hall were not simple. Now, Celestial Venerable Zonglong had used the dragon burial scripture to extract the evil power of these 2 hell divine halls. Moreover, he had also used this power to destroy extreme Yin Temple and ambushing Arrow Hall. However, he opened his divine eyes of Delusion Breaker and looked at the scene inside extreme Yin Temple and ambushing Arrow Hall through the light screen that Wu Yi was holding up. After a pause, he couldn't help but frown slightly. If it's just like this, it seems that it will still be somewhat difficult to completely destroy extreme Yin Temple and ambushing Arrow Hall. Extreme Yin Temple and ambushing Arrow Hall had already begun to crumble under Celestial Venerable Zonglong's dragon burial formation. However, there was still the replica Life and Death Book, the Grand Supreme Divine Sense Incarnation, and the Nether King's Divine Sense Incarnation. These 3 were the most ancient existences. Even though they were only incarnations of remnant thoughts, their power was still endless. Although Fengshen Tianzuan, Celestial Venerable Zonglong, and John Doe were also very powerful, they were only incarnations of remnant souls. The strength and number of people on both sides were equal. In addition, Extreme Yin Temple and Ambushing Arrow Hall were extremely sturdy. In the end, it would be very difficult to truly destroy Extreme Yin Temple and Ambushing Arrow Hall. Boom! Rays of destructive light intertwined in Extreme Yin Temple and Ambushing Arrow Hall. The surroundings turned dark, and the entire place changed color. Dragon Burial. A hazy voice came from the Life and Death book. It was extremely cold, and there was an extremely terrifying murderous intent that swept out. With a swoosh, the endless void was annihilated. At this moment, its speed was extremely fast, and it pounced on Celestial Venerable Zonglong. Moreover, the Grand Supreme Divine Sense Incarnation and the Nether King's Incarnation attacked together. While fighting against Fengshen Tianzuan and John Doe's remnant soul, they also attacked Celestial Venerable Zonglong together with the Life and Death book. They wanted to kill Celestial Venerable Zonglong's incarnation first. Then, they would disintegrate the Dragon Burial Formation and stop the destruction of Extreme Yin Temple and Ambushing Arrow Hall. These two divine temples were of great significance to their side. Crack! At this moment, a huge crack appeared in the sky, and another hazy figure stepped out. Endless illusory figures of great worlds surrounded him. Then, these illusory figures of great worlds pressed down and instantly enveloped the Life and Death book. They annihilated the killing power of the Grand Supreme Divine Sense Incarnation and the Nether King's Incarnation. Daoren. The voice from the Life and Death book was still hazy, but it was obviously colder, and the aura of death was surging. Lin Tianyi and the others were tens of thousands of feet away from Extreme Yin Temple. With the help of the strange light screen that Wu Yi held up, not only could they see everything in Extreme Yin Temple and Ambushing Arrow Hall, but they could also hear the sounds. At this moment, when they heard the voice from the Life and Death book and saw the hazy figure surrounded by the illusory figures of great worlds, Lin Tianyi and Wuxing Crocodile's expressions changed again. Celestial Venerable Daoren? Lin Tianyi's pupils contracted. Beside him, Wuxing Crocodile also widened its eyes. 3 of the legendary 9 people have appeared together. Moreover, this aura is so powerful. At this moment, it could naturally see that the aura outside Celestial Venerable Daoren's body was terrifying. It was no weaker than Celestial Venerable Zonglong's. Are those 9 people really reincarnated? Are they all from the same origin? Moreover, it saw the illusory figures of great worlds outside Celestial Venerable Daoren's body. Its power was unparalleled. Are those formed by the divining divine skill? Lin Tianyi looked at that place. Even though they were tens of thousands of feet away, the divining divine skill in his body involuntarily circulated. Obviously, those illusory figures of great worlds were indeed formed by Celestial Venerable Dao Ren's divining divine skill. The divining divine skill in his body felt the aura and resonated with it. Boom! In Extreme Yin Temple and Ambushing Arrow Hall, endless illusory figures of great worlds surged and shrouded the Life and Death book. The surging power of death from the Life and Death book was instantly defeated. The illusory figures of the great worlds also dissipated. Immeasurable life and death. A voice came from the Life and Death book. The Life and Death Dharma appeared immediately and continued to engulf Celestial Venerable Zonglong. The surging Life and Death Dharma was extremely terrifying. It was the power of the eternal divine path. In the blink of an eye, it pressed down on Celestial Venerable Zonglong and engulfed Celestial Venerable Daoren. Clang! At this moment, the ear-piercing sound of a weapon rang out. A stone spear appeared in Celestial Venerable Daoren's hand. The tip of the stone spear had a drop of blood the size of a baby's thumb. It would never dry up and contained an extremely terrifying aura. Holding the stone spear, celestial venerable Tao Ren gently shook it. A ray of black light shot out from the stone spear and instantly shattered the endless life and death dharma in the life and death book. It directly pierced through the life and death book and weakened the aura of the life and death book. You actually managed to find it. The Nether King's eyes turned cold. It's naturally not that simple to destroy your incarnations and spiritual consciousness and erase extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall. It's impossible with ordinary methods. Fengshen Tianzuan spoke for the first time. Countless years ago, we threw it into the endless abyss. How did you find it? The Grand Supreme's eyes were cold. It's an ancient artifact that Master used in the past. No matter where you suppress it, we can find it, Celestial Venerable Tao Ren said. With a whoosh, the stone spear in his hand flew out and appeared in front of Fengshen Tianzuan. Fengshen Tianzuan's eyes were calm. He raised his hand and grabbed the stone spear. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying aura surged out. When this aura appeared, the Grand Supreme's incarnation, the Nether King's incarnation, and the replica of the Life and Death book involuntarily trembled. You? Very good, the Grand Supreme said coldly. His vast and mighty light filled the sky and pressed down on Fengshen Tianzuan. At the same time, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He directly tore through the void and disappeared on the spot. This caused the expressions of Lin Tian and the rest to change. The ancient highest elder, the legendary existence, now actually fled. Not only them, but even Fengshen Tianzuan, Celestial Venerable Tao Ren, and Celestial Venerable Zhang Long were slightly shocked. A strange light flashed in their eyes. Obviously, they did not expect this to happen. It was too late to stop them. The other party had already left. Buzz! The void was distorted. The Nether King and the replica of the Life and Death book retreated. Like the Grand Supreme, they hid in the void and chose to escape. They knew very well how terrifying the stone spear in Fengshen Tianzuan's hand was. Now, Fengshen Tianzuan was holding this ancient weapon and had the help of Celestial Venerable Zhang Long, the Nameless Remnant Soul, and Celestial Venerable Tao Ren. If they resisted it head-on, they would be destroyed in the end. Although there were only incarnations and weak spiritual consciousnesses in the replica of the Life and Death book here, their original bodies would not be affected even if they were destroyed. However, these incarnations and spiritual consciousnesses were deliberately left behind for other purposes. If they were destroyed in this place, it would affect many things. The Life and Death book had even abandoned the extreme temple and subduing arrow hall for this. Clang! The sound of weapons was ear-piercing. The stone spear in Fengshen Tianzuan's hand vibrated and shattered the greater void. The Nether King's incarnation and the replica of the Life and Death book were shaken out. At the same time, the power of the stone spear and the four-symbol seal completely sealed the surrounding space. Nether King, Sage King Luanzhuan, your incarnations and the remnant consciousness in the replica of the sacred weapon will be buried here today. The Grand Supreme escaped too abruptly, and he did not react in time to stop him. However, now that the Nether King's incarnation and the Life and Death book had escaped, he was naturally on guard. Celestial Venerable Tao Ren walked over. Endless illusory images of worlds surrounded his body as if they were real worlds. Celestial Venerable Zhang Long's eyes were deep. The dragon patterns on his body intertwined and revealed true dragons. The dragon roars were loud and ear-piercing. The Nameless Remnant Soul was the most direct and domineering. Blood rushed out from the ancient sarcophagus behind him and headed straight for the Nether King and the Life and Death book. Fengshen Tianzuan, Celestial Venerable Tao Ren, and Celestial Venerable Zhang Long also moved. With Fengshen Tianzuan, who was holding the stone spear in his hand, they launched a destructive attack. Boom! 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 This kind of attack was terrifying, especially the stone spear in Fengshen Tianzuan's hand. It was so powerful that even the Nether King and the Life and Death book were forced to dodge. In the blink of an eye, they were pierced through several times. Their auras weakened rapidly. In the blink of an eye, 15 minutes passed. Chi. Dim lights sputtered. The stone spear in Fengshen Tianzuan's hand pierced through the Nether King's incarnation's forehead. The drop of blood on the stone spear shone with a mortal holy light, causing cracks to appear on the Nether King's incarnation. Investiture of the gods. You. Very good. The Nether King's incarnation's eyes were extremely cold. Fengshen Tianzuan did not say anything. The ancient spear in his hand shook slightly and directly shattered the Nether King's incarnation. At the same time, Celestial Venerable Zonglong, Celestial Venerable Dao Run, and the Nameless Remnant Soul besieged the Life and Death Book replica. Each of them used powerful supernatural powers and secret skills to shatter the Life and Death Book replica. A ray of black light of death rushed out from it. Nameless, Zonglong, Dao Run, Investiture of the gods. This ball of black light intertwined with the rich power of life and death. It was a wisp of spiritual consciousness left behind by the Lord of Hell, Holy King Luan Zhuan. Fengshen Tianzuan did not say anything else. The stone spear in his hand shook and flew out like a bolt of lightning. It directly pierced through the ball of black light and instantly shattered the spiritual consciousness left behind by the Lord of Hell in the Life and Death Book replica. It turned into a light fog and dissipated. His eyes were so deep that the bottom could not be seen. He formed a seal with one hand, and the stone spear flew out again. It carried a drop of blood and directly pierced through the extreme Yin Temple and the arrow subduing hall. Together with the dragon burial formation of Celestial Venerable Zonglong, the extreme Yin Temple and the arrow subduing hall were torn apart in an instant. Every part of them began to collapse and turned into dust inch by inch. Tens of thousands of feet away, Lin Tianyi and the others saw this scene and could not help but feel a chill down their spines. The Nether King's incarnation, the Life and Death Book replica, the spiritual consciousness of the Lord of Hell, the extreme Yin Temple, and the arrow subduing hall. They are all destroyed. Lin Tian's eyes could not help but flicker. P.S. Well, recently, the first update is placed at 5 o'clock in the morning. It is convenient for everyone to see it when they wake up. Many of you should have noticed this. Also, there is no fixed time for the second update every day. About this, I have to save some manuscripts as soon as possible and confirm it. When the time comes, I will tell everyone after the update. Chapter 16:16. The Supreme Incarnation had escaped. The Netherworld King's incarnation was destroyed. The Life and Death Book replica and the spiritual consciousness of the Lord of Hell were destroyed, and the extreme Yin Temple and subduing Arrow Hall were also destroyed. Lin Tian could not help but be moved by such a huge event that happened in just one day. Those people are simply, and Shifei sucked in a breath of cold air. With a rumbling sound, the extreme Yin Temple and subduing Arrow Hall, which were tens of thousands of feet away, were torn apart. Then, the cracked parts continued to collapse, turning into pieces of stone fragments that drifted away. Fengshen Tianzuan's incarnation, Celestial Master Zonglong's incarnation, Celestial Master Doran's incarnation, and the Nameless Remnant Soul were all there. Celestial Master Doran suddenly looked in Lin Tian's direction. Just like Fengshen Tianzuan and the others, his appearance was also difficult to see clearly. Only a pair of deep eyes could be seen. "Senior brother, that young man, Celestial Master," Doran asked Fengshen Tianzuan. There was a trace of doubt in his deep eyes that were like black holes. Fengshen Tianzuan shook his head and said, "Let's go." Celestial Master, Doran finally looked in Lin Tian's direction. In the next moment, the four of them disappeared silently. "They're all gone," Lin Tian muttered to himself. He looked in that direction. The extreme Yin Temple and subduing Arrow Hall were still collapsing. After a dozen breaths, the extreme Yin Temple and subduing Arrow Hall completely collapsed and turned into ashes. Only wisps of smoke and fog floated in the air. Looking in that direction, he paused for a moment. Then, he took a deep breath and called Wu Yi. The group landed on the ground. I really didn't expect to see 3 of the 9 people in this place. Moreover, They are all reincarnations of supreme existences from before the Antiquity Age. Moreover, they are all from the same sect. This is really, Wuxing Crocodile sighed. He was still shocked by the appearance of Fengshen Tianzuan and the others and the fact that they were reincarnations and fellow disciples of the same sect. Moreover, the battle that happened here today was really shocking. It was like a battle of the legendary level. Lin Tian looked at the place where Fengshen Tianzuan and the others had disappeared and said, "It seems that the Grand Elder, Yama, and the Lord of Hell are on the same side. The 9 Celestial Masters, including Fengshen Tianzuan and the First Taboo, Wu Ming, are on the same side. The two sides seem to have been fighting since the remote antiquity times and have continued to fight until today. Tell me, what is the reason?" "Who knows?" Wuxing Crocodile said. "However, no matter what the reason is, Taishang, Pluto, and the Lord of Hell are definitely not good people. This is certain." "I think so too." And Shui felt the same way. "Yeah." Little Taichu waved its little paws and cried. It was obviously expressing the same meaning as Wuxing Crocodile and in Shui. Previously, it was sealed by the Ambush Arrow King, a subordinate of the Lord of Hell, and it was very unhappy. Since Taishang, Pluto, and the Lord of Hell were on the same side as the Lord of Hell, they were definitely not good people. The little guy's thoughts were that simple. Then, the little guy's eyes curved into small crescents. It stood on Wu Yi's shoulder and intimately rubbed against Wu Yi's cheek. Wu Yi raised his hand and rubbed the little guy's little head. And Shui looked at this scene with envy. He couldn't wait to exchange places with the little guy immediately. Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi and smiled. Then he asked, "All right, Wu Yi, what do you plan to do next?" Wu Yi was swept into the immortal region because of him and the blood ancestors' blood-devouring divine formation. Previously, they should have been together at Ethereal Mountain. Now that everything here was over, he didn't know whether Wu Yi planned to return to the 10 Directions heavenly region or stay with them for the time being. Wu Yi looked at Lin Tian, then looked around. After a pause, he said to Lin Tiandao, "I'll go with you guys. Let's walk around." "Okay." Lin Tian naturally knew what Wu Yi meant. Wu Yi spent almost all his time at Ethereal Mountain and rarely went out. Now that he was unexpectedly swept into the immortal region, it was obvious that he wanted to walk around the outside world. He looked at Wu Yi and said with a smile, "I also think that you should walk around more." "Yes." Wu Yi nodded slightly. Then, a faint light suddenly flashed through his peaceful eyes. He activated his divine power and directly shook little Taichu away from his shoulder. At the same time, he shook Lin Tian and Shui and Wuxing Crocodile away as well. Almost in the next instant, a cold voice rang out. It was the voice of the Grand Supreme who had escaped from extreme Yin Temple earlier. "Your divine senses are very good. You can even detect this." As this voice rang out, a huge dark vortex instantly appeared beside Wu Yi and directly swept Wu Yi into it. This divine consciousness incarnation was originally left behind by us for other matters. However, it has greater value than dealing with you. Burn with it and banish you to eternity. The cold voice then disappeared. However, the dark vortex still existed and quickly swallowed Wu Yi. This sudden scene caused little Taichu, Wuxing Crocodile, and Shui to turn pale with fright. Lin Tian was also greatly shocked. He never expected that the Grand Supreme who had escaped from extreme Yin Temple would suddenly attack them. Moreover, such an ancient existence would actually launch a sneak attack and burn his divine consciousness incarnation to deal with Wu Yi. At the same time, he instantly understood why Wu Yi had shaken them all away just now. It was obviously to prevent them from getting into trouble. At this time, seeing that Wu Yi was quickly being swallowed into the dark vortex, he was anxious. He directly burst out with his fastest speed, turning into a humanoid lightning bolt, and rushed over. He grabbed Wu Yi's hand, who was being sucked into the dark vortex, and wanted to pull him out of the dark vortex. However, that dark vortex was so terrifying that even Wu Yi, who was a half-step divine emperor who could instantly kill an ordinary half-step divine emperor, could be sucked into it. How could he, who was only a true immortal, possibly pull Wu Yi out of it? The dark vortex's terrifying suction force pulled him in as well. Together with Wu Yi, they instantly disappeared. In the next moment, the dark vortex also dissipated. Lin Tian. Little Taichu flapped its six-colored wings and flew over. However, Lin Tian and Wu Yi had already disappeared. Not even a trace of their aura was left behind. They had disappeared without a trace. Disappeared. Whooshing Crocodile's eyes widened. Could it be? Looking at the place where Lin Tian and Wu Yi had disappeared, his monster body trembled slightly. And Shui was also anxious. She knew what Whooshing Crocodile was thinking at this moment. She said, they shouldn't have been killed by the dark vortex. Before the Great Supreme disappeared, he mentioned the word exile. They must still be alive. Exile? Where did they get exiled to? Whooshing Crocodile asked anxiously. I don't know. And Shui shook her head. Her eyes were full of worry. But it can't be a good place. Then she gritted her teeth. She was worried and angry at the same time. That old bastard, he was one of the oldest existences before the Antiquity Age. How could he sneak attack us like that? Bastard. In the endless darkness, Lin Tian couldn't see or sense anything. The only thing he could feel was a touch of softness in his hand. He knew that it was Wu Yi's hand. At this moment, in the endless darkness, he couldn't see or sense his surroundings clearly. He couldn't even make a sound. However, he was strangely calm. He was still alive, so Wu Yi must be fine too. Moreover, he was holding Wu Yi's hand. Wu Yi was right beside him. Time passed silently. After an unknown amount of time, the darkness gradually dispersed. He felt a strong force on his body. Then, his vision became bright again. He stepped on solid ground again. Looking around, the sky was slightly dark. There were some strange plants around, and the soil was very barren. Aren't you stupid? A gentle voice sounded beside him. Lin Tian turned his head and saw Wu Yi's side profile. She was quiet and beautiful. She was calmly looking into the distance. He knew what Wu Yi meant. He knew that the dark whirlpool could even suck in a half-step godly emperor expert like her. He couldn't do anything even if he rushed over. Why did he still rush over after she pushed him away? Why did he put himself in danger? How could I watch you get sucked into that unknown whirlpool without doing anything? If I rushed over, what if a miracle happened and I could pull you out? Even if I couldn't, I could at least bear the danger with you. He smiled. Besides, aren't we all fine now? Wu Yi looked into the distance. Her expression didn't change, but a faint light flashed in her eyes. This place, we're not fine, she said. Why not? We're not injured at all. Aren't we all fine? Lin Tian was a little confused. Then he looked at Wu Yi curiously. After a pause, he said, speaking of which, you didn't use your divine will when you said those two sentences. Wu Yi had always used her divine will to speak. Since he met Wu Yi, he had only seen Wu Yi speak once. However, at this time, in this place, Wu Yi spoke two sentences consecutively. She didn't use her divine will to speak. This surprised him. Wu Yi looked into the distance. Her delicate lips moved. For words came out of her mouth. Cultivation can't be used. Lin Tian's expression changed. He hurriedly sensed his own body. Then his expression changed. He couldn't sense his own cultivation. The divine power in his body seemed to have disappeared. Even his sturdy body had become like an ordinary person's. Our cultivation disappeared? He looked at Wu Yi. Wu Yi shook her head. It's just suppressed by this world. It's suppressed by this world? Hearing this, Lin Tian frowned. He looked around and said, you mean our cultivation didn't disappear? It's just that we can't use it in this world. After we leave here, we'll return to our original state? Yes. Wu Yi nodded. Seeing Wu Yi nod his head, Lin Tian heaved a sigh of relief. Then, in the next moment, he was puzzled again. He looked around again and asked Wu Yi, where is this place? Chapter 16-17. In response to Lin Tian's question, Wu Yi looked into the distance and said, Wushang Domain. Wushang Domain? Lin Tian Wei was puzzled. This was the first time he had heard of these words. It's a great world without spiritual energy or immortal spiritual energy. Even a god-emperor would be suppressed to an ordinary person if he lived in it. It's also known as the heaven and earth cage. Wu Yi said. Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi. This was the longest sentence Wu Yi had said since Wu Yi met him. At the same time, he was even more shocked by what Wu Yi said. Even a god-emperor would be suppressed to an ordinary person if he lived in this place? Is it that exaggerated? A god-emperor was the most powerful realm on the path of cultivation. His divine power was limitless. But even such an existence would be suppressed to an ordinary person if he came here? Wu Yi didn't say anything else. He just nodded slightly. Doesn't that mean we can't leave this place? Lin Tian frowned. Living in this emptiness territory, their cultivation had been suppressed to zero, and they were unable to use their divine sense and divine energy. Even their powerful physiques had been suppressed to the level of an ordinary person. So, how could they leave this world? This was equivalent to directly trapping them in this world. If I'm not mistaken, that's the case, Wu Yi said calmly. Lin Tian frowned even more. He couldn't help but understand why the Grand Supreme wanted to drag Wu Yi into this place. He obviously sensed Wu Yi's terrifying potential and didn't want to leave such a huge threat behind. That clone wasn't a match for Wu Yi. Therefore, the Grand Supreme burned that divine sense clone to launch a sneak attack and drag Wu Yi into this Wushang domain, where even a god-emperor would be suppressed to an ordinary person. He wanted to trap Wu Yi in this world forever. Thinking of this, he looked at Wu Yi's face. His furrowed brows relaxed, and he became a bit speechless. This was because even though he knew that he might be trapped in this world forever, Wu Yi was still so calm and composed. He still didn't show any emotion. Hand. Wu Yi looked into the distance and spoke again. Lin Tianwei was stunned, then quickly reacted. Previously, she wanted to pull Wu Yi out of the dark vortex summoned by Taishang's burning incarnation, but she grabbed Wu Yi's hand and fell here. Until now, she was still holding on to Wu Yi. He let go of Wu Yi's hand and smiled awkwardly. Then, what do we do next? He asked. Wu Yi paused and said, I don't know. In fact, Lin Tian didn't want to get a good idea from Wu Yi. He just wanted to divert the awkwardness from his current situation. Then let's walk around first. Just take it as a leisurely stroll, and at the same time, get familiar with this world. He said, after being swept into this strange, wantless void domain, they were unable to use their cultivation and became no different from ordinary mortals. After this, whether it was to find a way to leave this world, or to truly be trapped in this world for eternity, they needed to truly understand and familiarize themselves with this world. Okay, Wu Yi nodded. At that moment, Lin Tian looked around, then called out to Wu Yi and walked in a random direction. He had heard from Wu Yi that this great world called the Infinite Sky Realm could suppress even godly emperors into ordinary people. It was possible that they would never be able to leave this world. At first, he had been very worried. After all, being trapped in this place forever was really like being exiled forever. It was extremely terrible. However, seeing Wu Yi beside him, who had been quiet all this time, he couldn't help but be affected. At this time, although he was in a very bad situation, he was still very calm. In this wantless void domain, other than the somewhat dark sky and the somewhat barren land, it was no different from an ordinary world. The two of them walked, and in the blink of an eye, a full 2 days had passed. In these 2 days, they had walked through many places and discovered that this world also had many living creatures and wild beasts. Of course, they were just ordinary wild beasts. They didn't have any demonic power, and they didn't have any intelligence. Then, not long after, a small village appeared in front of them. From afar, they could see that there were people walking around in the village. This made Lin Tian somewhat surprised. He didn't expect that there would be humans in this prison of heaven and earth that could suppress even god-emperors into ordinary mortals. However, when he thought about how there were many wild beasts in this world, and then looked again at the nearby village and the villagers walking back and forth in the village, he quickly understood. After all, if there were wild beasts in this world, then it wasn't a big deal that there were humans. Moreover, Whether there were humans in this world or not didn't have much to do with whether this world could suppress god emperors into ordinary mortals or not. Shall we stay there for a while? He asked Wu Yi. In these 2 days, he and Wu Yi had walked through many places in this world. At night, they would casually find a place to squat for the night. Now that they had found a village with humans living in it, they could have a real place to rest. Naturally, it was a good choice. It was much more comfortable than squatting in the wild. Of course, the most important thing was that they could ask a lot of questions where there were people. It was very useful for them to understand this world better. And Wu Yi nodded. Then, the two of them quickly arrived outside the small village. In this world, it was already dusk. There were very few people walking around in the village. The majority of the people had already gone to bed. Lin Tian and Wu Yi entered the small village and very politely requested to stay in the village for a while. At this time, the people who were still walking around in the village were mostly elders of the village. They were all in their 60s and were very easygoing and simple. They didn't have any vigilance against Lin Tian and Wu Yi, so they didn't ask too much and agreed. Go to that house. You can stay there for as long as you want. You can use the things in the house as you wish, said one of the elders. Said one of the old men. He pointed to a house in the southeast of the village for the village chief. Lin Tian found out that the owner of the house was a hunter in the village. Unfortunately, he had met with death in the mountains a few days ago. He thanked the elder and chatted for a while. Then, he and Wu Yi entered the house. The house was very ordinary. There was a bed, a kitchen stove, bowls, chopsticks, and so on. There were also some broadswords, spears, and bows. It was very suitable for a hunter to live in. Goo! A soft sound was heard. Lin Tian tilted his head and looked at Wu Yi. The sound came from Wu Yi's stomach. I'm hungry too. Lin Tian blushed with shame and helplessness. They were both powerful cultivators. One was a true immortal, and the other was a half-step divine emperor. But now that they were in this world, not only were their cultivations suppressed to the level of ordinary people, but they would also feel hungry if they didn't eat for a long time. He couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, he thought of an even worse problem. According to this situation, our lifespan won't be reduced to the level of ordinary people. Only about 100 years, right? Wu Yi shook his head. No, it's still eternal life? Lin Tian asked. Yes. Wu Yi nodded. Hearing this, Lin Tian breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, although their cultivation was suppressed to the level of ordinary people and they didn't know how to leave this place, at least their lifespan was still unlimited. Under normal circumstances, they didn't have to worry about death. Goo! Another soft sound came from Wu Yi. Lin Tian blushed with shame. He coughed twice and said, Let's get some food first. Now, although they still had the body of eternal life and wouldn't die if they didn't eat, if they didn't drink, their hunger would continue. In this way, even if they didn't starve to death because of their body of eternal life, it would still be very uncomfortable if their hunger was maintained. Accompanied by the goo-goo sound of their stomachs, it was even more awkward and terrible. Therefore, even if they didn't drink, they could still live. Now, they had to maintain 3 meals a day. Wu Yi looked at the stove. There were still some vegetables and rice. Obviously, they were ingredients left behind by the owner of this house when he was alive. She walked over and quietly looked at these things. Then, she paused and didn't move for a long time. After another 10 breaths passed, she turned to look at Lin Tian and said, I don't know how to. Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi and opened his mouth. Then, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Just now, when he saw Wu Yi walk over to the stove, he originally thought that Wu Yi would be able to cook very quickly. Moreover, he felt that even if it was the simplest vegetables and rice, Wu Yi's food would definitely be very delicious. This was because, in his impression, Wu Yi was really perfect. This kind of small matter couldn't stump Wu Yi. However, what he didn't expect was that after Wu Yi walked over and paused there for a long time, she actually turned around and said to him, I don't know how to. What are you laughing at? Wu Yi asked him. Lin Tian Dao. Well, I just think it's a little interesting. Interesting? How should I put it? You're usually too perfect. So perfect that I can't help but feel ashamed. Do you still remember how Little Z described you? Being too perfect is your strength, but also your only weakness. Lin Tiandao. Now that I've seen this side of you, I realize that there are some simple things that you don't know how to do. To be honest, well, this makes me a little happy. Wu Yi looked at him, her calm eyes flashing slightly. Then she turned to the side and said, "You do it." Lin Tian smiled and nodded. He walked forward and asked Wu Yi to wait by the side. He began to cook. For him, this kind of thing was as easy as turning over his hand. The food was quickly prepared. After filling his stomach, he quickly cleaned up the bowls and chopsticks. At this time, the sky had completely darkened, and there were sparse stars dotting the dark sky. Then a new problem arose. Chapter 16-18. Originally, the two of them did not have a normal place to rest for the past few days, so it was very casual for them to find a place to squat for a night. However, now that they were living in the same room with only one bed, this situation was a bit awkward. Of course, this awkwardness was actually only in the beginning. After this moment, Lin Tian said to Wu Yi, "Go rest on the bed. There are some wooden stools in the room. If you line them up, they can also be used as a bed. I'll use these wooden stools as a bed to rest." After being swept into the emptiness region by the Grand Elder, their cultivation was suppressed to the level of an ordinary person. Although they still had eternal life, they would feel hungry and thirsty. They would also feel sleepy. Although not eating or resting would not affect their lives, they would feel more uncomfortable. Therefore, even if they would not die without eating or resting, they still had to eat and rest. Okay. Wu Yi did not reject Lin Tian's offer to use the bed. The night passed quickly. In the dim sky, the stars gradually scattered, and the first rays of the morning sun floated out. On a new day, Lin Tian and Wu Yi did not leave the village. They continued to stay. With their current situation, they needed such a normal residence. There were roughly 30 or so families in this village, and they were all very simple and warm. They were not on guard against people at all. Lin Tian and Lu Li stayed in the village, and 3 days passed very quickly. Lin Tian gradually became familiar with the people in the village. During this time, Lin Tian chatted with the people in the village. He asked a lot of questions about this world and learned a lot of things. However, he did not get any useful information. In the blink of an eye, another few days passed. On this day, Lin Tian asked Wu Yi to stay in the village. He walked out of the village alone and took a hunting knife and a spear from the house. Not long after, he walked into a mountain far away from the village. He was going to hunt some wild beasts for them to eat. At the same time, he was going to trade with the other people in the village for daily necessities, such as rice and clothes. Because their cultivation was suppressed to 0, they could not take out the stone rings and things in their bodies. They could not take out some baodan and clothes. Now, they could only rely on beast meat of equal value to trade with the other people in the village for simple daily necessities. As for hunting, it was naturally very simple for him. Even though his cultivation had been suppressed to the level of an ordinary mortal, and his physical strength had temporarily been reduced to the level of an ordinary mortal, he was still an extremely powerful cultivator. He could still use his battle experience and simple martial techniques. Ordinary wild beasts were easy for him to deal with. At sunset, he carried a red fur lion that weighed about 200 jin back to the village. Everyone in the village was shocked. The villagers knew how powerful this red fur lion was. There were several hunters in the village, but none of them could deal with such a powerful beast. A few days ago, the hunters in the village were killed by this red fur lion. Many villagers surrounded Lin Tian and praised him. Lin Tian had a smile on his face. He simply tidied up the red fur lion and gave some red fur lion meat to the village chief, who agreed to let him and Wu Yi live in the village. He also used the red fur lion meat to exchange with other villagers for some rice and a few sets of clothes that were barely suitable for him and Wu Yi. In the following days, he still stayed in the village. From time to time, he would enter the distant mountains to hunt. He would also go to other places that were even further away, exploring this world and looking for a way for him and Wu Yi to leave this world. After all, although the possibility of him and Wu Yi being able to leave this world was close to 0, he could not obediently be trapped in this world forever. That was obviously not in line with his character. In the blink of an eye, nearly a year had passed. Still no gains. Under a large banyan tree at the edge of the village, Lin Tian and Wu Yi sat next to a scorching sun in the sky. For nearly a year, he had gone to many places, explored many places, and looked for clues that could lead to leaving this world. However, he did not find anything. "You've worked hard," Wu Yi said softly. In this year, the daily necessities, meals, and communication with the villagers were all done by Lin Tian. She was not good at these things. Although she also participated in the search for a way to leave this world, most of it was still done by Lin Tian. After being dragged into this world, Lin Tian was basically the one who took care of her in this year. "It's okay, this is not considered hard work," Lin Tian said with a smile. This year's life was very ordinary and dull. Although he had been looking for a way to leave this world, and wanted to leave this world with Wu Yi, he did not find this kind of ordinary and dull life in this world boring at all. In fact, he liked it very much. At this time, the sound of footsteps came from afar. Two little girls around 6 years old ran over from the village and surrounded the two of them. Or rather, they surrounded Wu Yi. They opened their big round eyes and looked up at Wu Yi. One of the little girls tugged at the corner of Wu Yi's clothes. "Sister, are you a princess?" The little girl's voice was crisp and very cute. "Princess?" Wu Yi looked at the little girl with confusion. "Because, sister, you are very beautiful. You are more beautiful than anyone Xiao Wan has ever seen. You are the most beautiful." The little girl called Xiao Wan said, "Sister must be a princess, right?" The other little girl said. She looked up at Wu Yi, her big eyes shining. Lin Tian remembered that this little girl's nickname was Xiao Ji. He also knew that even in such a strange world, the villagers would tell simple fairy tales to the children. Generally speaking, fairy tales were full of existences like princesses. Wu Yi looked at the two little girls and the two little girls who were full of expectation. For a moment, she did not know how to respond. She wanted to shake her head, but she was worried that she would destroy some kind of expectation in the hearts of the two little girls. However, when she nodded, she felt that it was inappropriate. As powerful and stunning as she was not good at dealing with this kind of thing. "That's right, sister is a princess," Lin Tian bent down and said for her. The two little girls immediately became happy, and their big eyes became even brighter. "Where is the princess from?" Xiao Wan asked Lin Tian. "Oh," Lin Tian said with a smile, "the most beautiful country in the world." "The most beautiful country in the world? Where? Xiao Ji asked Lin Tian, looking a little excited and yearning. "A place very, very far away. When we grow up, can we also be as beautiful as Sister Princess? As long as you like and love Sister, when you grow up, you will definitely be as beautiful as Sister," Lin Tian said with a smile. "Really? Really? Yes. Xiao Wan will always like and love Sister Princess. Xiao Ji too." The two little girls became more and more happy. Xiao Wan even gave a small flower to Wu Yi and asked strange questions that were unique to children. It was not until more than 2 hours later that they left happily. Wu Yi looked at the flower that Xiao Wan gave her in her hand. Her eyes were very gentle, and there was some strange light in them. "Thank you," she said softly to Lin Tian. She was not very talkative and was not good at communicating with children like this. When faced with the various questions of two little girls around 5 years old, she really did not know how to deal with them. However, Lin Tian helped her answer all of the questions of the two little girls. Moreover, the most important thing was that he made the two little girls very happy in the end. She felt that it was difficult for her to do this kind of thing. Lin Tian looked at her and joked, "Do I look like a qualified princess attendant?" Facing Lin Tian's joke, Wu Yi looked at the small flower in her hand and smiled gently. Lin Tian could not help but be slightly startled. This seemed to be the first time that he made Wu Yi smile. In the blink of an eye, he came back to his senses and smiled to himself. Staying in this world, staying in this village, time passed quickly. After that, more than 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. In more than 10 years, Lin Tian was still constantly looking for a way to leave this world. Unfortunately, there were no clues. At the same time, a new problem emerged. That was, although they were now suppressed to the level of ordinary mortals by this strange world and needed to eat and sleep like normal people, they were still immortal existences. Their appearance was always the same and had never aged. This matter gradually aroused the curiosity of some people in the village. It seems that we have to leave. At night, in the house, Lin Tian and Wu Yi said. A long time ago, he made some improvements to the house here. He added a second wooden bed and made a simple cloth partition between it and Wu Yi's bed. Yes, Wu Yi said softly. Obviously, she knew what Lin Tian was thinking at this time. If they continued to stay in this village and their appearance never aged, it would soon arouse the suspicion and vigilance of the other villagers, and even panic. Previously, when we were hunting in a mountain far away, we found a good place in the mountain. The air and environment are very good. I will take some time to build a simple house nearby, and then we will leave here. Lin Tian Ondao. He did not want to arouse the vigilance and panic of the villagers here. He was even worried that the villagers here would be traumatized by their immortality and that it would interfere with the normal lives of these villagers. Yes, Wu Yi replied. The night dispersed, and soon a new day came. In the following time, Lin Tian did not temporarily search for a way to leave this world. Instead, he took some time to build a house in a very good place in the distant mountain. It was not until about 2 months later that he barely finished. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.